Chapter 582. At this moment, Danzo seemed to have completely put himself in the shoes of Naruto, commanding Orochimaru with the tone of a superior, and even glancing provocatively at Hyojin, who attended the meeting as Homusubi from Amatsukami. Almost at the same time, Hyojin and Orochimaru's faces darkened. Although it was expected that after becoming the acting Hokage, Shimura Danzo would inevitably become arrogant, but no one expected that this guy would be so arrogant to such an extent. Simply unreasonable. This old man is now Naruto, you should understand what this means. Danzo didn't care about Orochimaru and Hyojin's reaction, and as he spoke, his face showed a disgusting expression of, I am the center, everything must revolve around me. Hyojin looked at Danzo and sneered, Tisk, it seems that it's impossible to make this idiot whose ambition and strength don't match up obediently as a lab rat. We must speed up the progress of the experiment, or else if we let this guy be Naruto's proxy for a while longer, God knows what kind of trouble he will cause. Hyojin faintly felt that Danzo was a little out of control, so he must speed up the progress of the experiment and get rid of this trouble as soon as possible. At this time, Orochimaru's face darkened, and without showing any weakness, he met Danzo's gaze and chuckled. Danzo, have you forgotten that I've long been a traitorous ninja? Naruto can't control me. Danzo suddenly stood up and shouted, Orochimaru! Orochimaru, who was still sitting in his seat, grinned and said, What, do you want to fight me here? Hyojin was speechless, and could only use the tone of a member of Amatsukami to warn Danzo, Danzo, I know that the victory over 3 generations Naruto has given you some inexplicable confidence, but I hope that you can understand that the one sitting in this room is not your enemy, nor is he your subordinate, we are partners, so please put away your Naruto's style, not to mention in the shinobi world, the name Naruto has long been useless. You. Danzo glared at Hyojin, but seeing the flame mask on Hyojin's face, and thinking about the powerful Amatsukami behind Homusubi, Danzo didn't lose his temper in the end. Whether it is Amatsukami, Akatsuki, or Orochimaru, all of you just wait for this old man will step on all of you like a bug, and eliminate all of you one by one. After secretly swearing in his heart, Danzo sat back, and the aura around his body became more and more gloomy. Ignoring the cold murderous intent coming from Danzo, Hyojin asked, Let's get back to the topic at hand, is the Kekkei Genkai task completed? Danzo replied, How could such a trivial matter be a problem for this old man? Hyojin gently nodded, Very good, so the preliminary preparations are all completed, the next step is to choose the location for the Kekkei Genkai ceremony. Since it is related to his own Kekkei Genkai ceremony, Danzo reluctantly put away his antagonistic emotions and asked, Do you have any suggestions about the location? Hyojin directly said, Because the proportion of water attribute chakra in the Kekkei Genkai ceremony you chose is too high, in order to balance this point, there aren't many places for us to choose from. Either the lava cave or the yellow desert. If we choose the lava cave, the suppression effect on water attribute chakra will be the best, but it will be difficult to use the power of the star constellation like Hiriko. But if we choose the yellow desert, as long as the terrain is high enough, we can barely use the power of the star constellation, but the suppression effect on water attribute chakra will be correspondingly weaker. Danzo's eyes flickered. Which one is safer? The lava cave. After a pause, Hyojin explained, In the Kekkei Genkai ceremony, the balance between the various attributes of chakra is always the key. Orochimaru also echoed, Hiriko can only use the power of the star constellation because his chakra is insufficient. You are Naruto, so the problem of chakra won't bother you. The chakra transmission technology between ninjas is not a high-end technology for the 5 great shinobi villages. According to the intelligence, Kumo Village is secretly developing a giant energy cannon with hundreds of ninjas supplying chakra, so even if Shimura Danzo doesn't have enough chakra, he can easily mobilize hundreds or thousands of Konoha ninjas to provide him with a steady supply of chakra through special equipment. So, even if Shimura Danzo doesn't have enough chakra, he can easily mobilize hundreds or thousands of Konoha ninjas to provide him with a steady supply of chakra. Danzo nodded and took out a map of the shinobi world. All the lava caves on the map are marked with a red pen. It can be seen that Danzo has already begun to research and select the location of the Kekai Genkai ceremony. Pointing to a lava cave in the northern part of the Land of Fire near the Land of Thunder, Danzo said, "This lava cave, this old man has already sent people to survey, everything is in line with the standard, and it is also in the territory of the Land of Fire. It is convenient for us to mobilize manpower, and it is also easier to conceal the location." Hyojin thought to himself, so, Danzo has already chosen the location. Humph, it seems that he has never relaxed his guard against me and Orochimaru. Orochimaru is obviously aware of this, and his face showed a disdainful expression. In fact, whether it is Hyojin or Orochimaru, they will not deliberately trick Danzo during the Kekai Genkai ceremony, because even if they do their best, the probability of Danzo surviving the Kekai Genkai ceremony is very low, so there is no need for them to play tricks. What they really need is the data of Danzo during the Kekai Genkai ceremony. Also, through the Kekai Genkai ceremony of Danzo, to prove whether the improvement of the Chimera technique is effective, whether the arrangement of the ceremony is reasonable, and so on. Danzo then said, "In 2 weeks, this old man will be able to complete the arrangement of the ceremony." Orochimaru smiled and said, "If you want to further improve your success rate, I suggest that you accept my body transformation, and that very interesting arm you recently obtained can also improve the strength of your body. I suggest that you replace that arm with your current arm before the Kekai Genkai fusion ceremony." Orochimaru Sedanzo was a little hesitant. "This old man needs to think about it." "Then you better think about it as soon as possible." After a pause, Orochimaru explained, "After accepting the body transformation, the body needs a period of recovery, so the earlier the transformation, the faster you can carry out the Kekai Genkai ceremony." Hyojin also didn't want Danzo to continue to delay, so he said, "You better complete the Kekai Genkai ceremony before the Akatsuki organization makes their next move, otherwise, I'm afraid you won't be able to sit in the position of Naruto for long." Danzo stood up, walked out of the meeting room, and said, "This old man will give you an answer as soon as possible." Chapter 583. After the Danzo left, Hyojin and Orochimaru also left the meeting room. Walking side by side in the dark passage of the base, the two of them were silent. Only the sound of their footsteps echoed in the quiet and empty base. Not long after, the two of them passed through the secret passage that connected to the outside of the village and came to a small forest outside of Mai. At this time, Orochimaru smiled and said, "The Danzo has gone out of control. The second Sama really has a good eye. The Danzo's tolerance and style can't bear the name of Naruto." Hyojin slightly tilted his head and glanced at Orochimaru. "A man about to die, bear with it." Orochimaru looked at Hyojin with interest. "I'm surprised that Amatsukami can tolerate the Danzo to this extent. Now I believe that one of you really wants to become a god." Hyojin did not deny it. "It's not a secret." "Is it your leader Yama?" After a short pause, Orochimaru asked in confusion, "But isn't a strong person at his level considered a god? I'm curious, what is it that he is after? Can the Chimera technique really give him what he wants?" Hyojin said lightly, "You ask too many questions." Orochimaru smiled. "My thirst for knowledge has always been strong." Hyojin asked in return, "Then why can you tolerate the Danzo?" "Being able to participate in this plan to create a god is my biggest goal." Looking back at Konoha village not far away, Orochimaru said with some emotion, I used to think about destroying Konoha in front of the old man, destroying the village he cherishes with my own hands, but now I don't care about that anymore. There is only one thing I really care about, and that is eternal life. This is also my pursuit," Hyojin said in his heart. A few days later, in the headmaster's office of the ninja school, Kuroto leisurely sat on an armchair, flipping through the Ghost Lantern Clan's water release secret technique that he had obtained from the Mist Secret Technique archive. His brows were sometimes furrowed, and sometimes he was smiling. At the moment, all his plans are moving forward in an orderly manner. The Danzo who ascended to the position of Naruto doesn't trust anyone, so the preparations for the Kekkei Genkai fusion ceremony are in his hands. Others can't interfere at all, so Hyojin naturally doesn't need to worry about this. As for Deadale, the Umbu of the Mist Village is still searching for him. It's just that this guy is wandering in the shinobi world without any clear purpose, and he also has the ability to fly with high maneuverability, so it's not easy to find his trail. Therefore, this matter can't be rushed, so he can only wait for the news from the Mist Village with peace of mind. Therefore, with a short period of free time, Hyojin began to study the secret technique of the Ghost Lantern Clan. This was also because the strength of his wind escape doppelganger, which had both the bone meridian and magnetic escape bloodline limits, had far exceeded his expectations. The average strength of the doppelgangers was pulled up by a lot, causing him to have no choice but to further increase the strength of the water escape doppelganger so that the strength of each doppelganger could be balanced again. After seriously studying the secret technique of the Ghost Lantern Clan, even the current Hyojin has to admit that the water technique of the Ghost Lantern Clan is indeed unique. For example, the water transformation technique, that can turn part of the body into water, or even completely water. This water technique can almost double the combat power of the clansmen of the Ghost Lantern Clan in an environment with abundant water. Second Mizukage Genjutsu is proficient in the water cannon technique, oil slide technique, and water balloon technique, which cover the various fields of attack, defense, and mobility. As for the vaporized danger burst technique, it is so powerful that even Second Mizukage, who has mastered the dust release, finds it difficult to deal with. It can be said that as long as Hyojin grasps the secret technique of the Ghost Lantern Clan, the strength of his water release clone will greatly increase, and he will be able to catch up to his wind release clone. However, although the Ghost Lantern Clan isn't a Kekkei ninja clan in the traditional sense, their physique is extraordinary. If one doesn't possess the bloodline of the Ghost Lantern Clan, it would be extremely difficult for them to practice their bizarre water release technique. Fortunately, Hyojin's water release clone has fused with Haku's cells, and the ice release Snow Clan, which Haku belongs to, has a very close relationship with the Ghost Lantern Clan. The two clans have had many marriages in history, so in theory, Hyojin's water release clone also has the aptitude to practice the water techniques of the Ghost Lantern Clan. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Hyojin was engrossed in studying the water techniques of the Ghost Lantern Clan, someone knocked on the door of the principal's office. "Come in." As Hyojin spoke, he put away the secret technique scroll in his hand. Soon, Irika and Shuei-mu walked into the principal's office together. Glancing at the frowning Irika, Hyojin asked, "What's wrong?" Irika handed a report to Hyojin and said helplessly, "Principal, this is already the 9th time today. It's all my fault for not supervising, and it has affected the normal teaching of the school. Please punish me." Hyojin flipped open the report, glanced at it, and immediately said happily, "Naruto challenged Sasuke 5 times, Lilac challenged Sasuke twice, You challenged Sasuke once, and even Ding Ci challenged Sasuke once." Needless to say, after Sasuke's arrogant declaration of being the number 1 in his cohort during the entrance ceremony, there were naturally students who were unconvinced and challenged him after the school term started. However, Sasuke wasn't bragging. All the students who challenged him were easily defeated by him, and among them, Naruto lost the most times. And this made everyone feel that Naruto's previous statement about learning immortal jutsu was just a boast. However, Hyojin knows that Naruto really entered one of the 3 secret places of the shinobi world, Ryuchi Cave. Not only did he sign a psychic contract with a great snake named Shinya, but he was also recognized by the White Snake Sage in the Ryuchi Cave by Heimaheim, acknowledging that he mastered the immortal jutsu of the Ryuchi Cave. Therefore, Naruto must have entered Sage Mode. As for why Naruto can't enter Sage Mode now, the reason is actually very easy to find. Firstly, because the concentration of nature energy in the shinobi world is much lower than in the Ryuchi Cave secret land, so the difficulty of entering Sage Mode in the shinobi world is obviously higher than in the Ryuchi Cave secret land. Second, Naruto is too eager to win, so he has lost his natural peace, and entering Sage Mode is even more difficult. On the side, Shueimu said, "Principal, I am also responsible for this matter, please don't punish Irika." Hyojin glanced at Shueimu and smiled. Apart from the pocket, this blue-haired, somewhat handsome guy with a gloomy temperament is the real spy that Orochimaru planted in the ninja school. Chapter 584. Standing quietly by the window of the headmaster's office, Hyojin looked down at the playground below. At this moment, Sasuke was standing in the middle of the playground with his arms crossed over his chest, while Naruto was sitting on the side rubbing his buttocks and muttering something. Obviously, Naruto challenged Sasuke again. "Naruto, this child," Hyojin smiled and shook his head. Before, when Irika reported to him that the students frequently fought in private, he didn't blame Irika for his lack of supervision. On the contrary, he told Irika not to restrain the students too much in this regard. After all, the ninja school teaches ninjas, and it's not a bad thing to let the students maintain a certain degree of competitive relationship. The current shinobi world is not as stable as the original world. In the original world, the Akatsuki organization was still dormant during this period and didn't make any big moves, and some years have passed since the Third Shinobi War, so Mai, who is far away from the threat of war, doesn't have any sense of crisis, so the atmosphere in the school is mainly relaxed, and the number of students entering each term is decreasing year by year. But in the original world, the village has just experienced a catastrophe, and the culprit is still hiding in the shinobi world, so the threat of war has never been far away from Mai. Letting the children understand the cruelty of the shinobi world as soon as possible is the real responsible behavior for them, otherwise, once they encounter a strong enemy, they will be like flowers in a greenhouse, weak and fragile. Of course, it was also very particular about how to grasp the appropriate degree of propriety. Just like the Mist Village, giving their village the nickname of Blood Mist Village, endlessly promoting blood and cruelty, encouraging the ninjas of the same village to kill each other, causing the village to have rebellions and coups every few days. That would be too stupid. Thinking about this, Hyojin's eyes fell on Sasuke. The scene of Sasuke knocking down Naruto was seen by him. Whether it is speed, strength, or skill, for this age, Sasuke is impeccable. What amazing growth! If I was at this age, I would also be beaten by this kid. Sasuke's progress is so dazzling that even Hyojin can't help but feel a little emotional. Sasuke, you can do it! Sasuke, you can do it! As Naruto climbed up from the ground again, the cheers of the girls immediately resounded throughout the playground. Sasuke's handsome appearance, coupled with his noble family background, is simply a fatal attraction to the little girls. At this moment, more than half of the girls gathered on the playground are cheering for Sasuke. This obviously caused the boys to feel the same hatred. They all cheered for Naruto, hoping that Naruto could avenge them. Only Neji stood far away, silently observing Sasuke. At present, it seems that Sasuke's strength should be unique. Compared with him, Ningxi is obviously inferior, and the other children are not at the same level as them. Without considering Naruto, after a few days of observation, Hyojin had a rough assessment of the students. At this time, Koharu, who was one of the village advisory elders, led 3 children into the school with Takagi Shinobu on their heads. Looking at the girl with short cyan hair, dark skin, and a somewhat familiar face, Hyojin's eyes narrowed, and he thought, "Hey, isn't that the 7-tailed Jinchuriki of the Takeganami village?" After a while, Zhuan Xiao-chun left the 3 children of the Takeganami village outside Hyojin's office and entered the office alone. Handing a document to Hyojin, Zhuan Xiao-chun said, "From today on, these 3 children of the Takeganami village will study in our Mai's ninja school. You have to take good care of them. In addition, the identity of Fu is confidential, and only you are allowed to know it. You are not allowed to reveal it to other people in the ninja school." Hyojin nodded. Zhuan Xiao-chun is so serious. Kuroto doesn't need to compare the information in his hand to determine that this girl with short cyan hair named Fu is the 7-tailed Jinchuriki of the Takeganami village. It's just that the sudden appearance of the Jinchuriki of the Takeganami village surprised him. Seeing that Hyojin's performance is much calmer than he expected, Zhuan Xiao-chun nodded with satisfaction, and immediately told the whole story to Hyojin. The matter of the Akatsuki organization, hunting tailed beasts, has long been known by the 5 great shinobi villages. Apart from the 5 great shinobi villages, only the Takeganami village has a tailed beast, but the strength of the Takeganami village is not enough to resist the attack of the Akatsuki organization. Therefore, in order to prevent the 7-tailed Jinchuriki of the Takeganami village from being captured by the Akatsuki organization, the 3 generations sent Zhuan Xiao-chun to the Takeganami village, hoping that the Takeganami village can send the 7-tailed Jinchuriki to Mai and let Mai be responsible for protecting them. Regarding Mai's proposal, a fierce debate broke out in the Takeganami village. But the threat of the Akatsuki organization is too great, and the Takeganami village's senior management simply doesn't have the confidence to protect the safety of their Jinchuriki, so after a stalemate, the Takeganami village finally made a compromise and sent a ninja team composed of 3 children to Mai in the name of learning exchange, and the 7-tailed Jinchuriki is hidden in this team. In other words, the only important person is Fu. As for the other 2 children, they are just tools to cover up Fu's identity. After pondering for a while, Hyojin asked, "Is the state of the 7-tailed Jinchuriki stable?" An unstable Jinchuriki is no different from a bomb. Because Gaara often goes on a rampage in the Sand Crypsis village, his father, the 4 generations of Kazekage, had to issue an order to execute him. If Fu's state is unstable, then leaving her in the village will be a huge risk for Mai. Zhuan Xiao-chun nodded and said, "Don't worry, Fu is very talented. She has never gone on a rampage in the Takeganami village, so there shouldn't be any problem. Moreover, Jishui is in the school. If she goes on a rampage, you can ask Jishui to temporarily restrain her with the Manjikyu Sharingan." Northwest of the Land of Fire. An Umbu of the Mist village pointed to the distance and said, "Captain, is that the target in front?" The captain of the Mist village nodded and said, "Height, age, hair color, and hairstyle all match the description. That guy should be our target." Deadale of the Rock village. The Umbu of the Mist village was puzzled and asked, "Captain, where is he going?" The captain of the Mist village looked at the map of the Land of Fire that he carried with him, and immediately frowned and said, "He is going in this direction. Is he going to the Fire Temple?" "Captain, let's follow him. We will lose him if we go any further." The Umbu of the Mist village was about to get up. The captain quickly grabbed him and pulled him back. "Don't mess around, the target is very vigilant and dangerous, we just need to follow him from a distance." Late at night, Hyojin, who was at home, received a scroll from a ninja crow. He opened it and grinned. The Fire Temple. Chapter 585. "Hey, didn't I hear a sound just now?" Carrying a lantern, a monk of the Fire Temple muttered. His companion on the side carefully looked around the quiet temple and whispered, "It should be a small animal. Didn't a squirrel wander in before?" "Is that so? Let's go back." While talking, the two monks respectfully saluted the Buddha statue sitting on the main seat of the temple, and then quietly left the temple. When the monks went far away, the light of the lantern gradually dimmed, leaving only the flickering candlelight on the candlestick in the temple. At this time, a shadow steadily fell from the beam to the ground. Lingering in front of the sculptures, the shadow couldn't help but praise, "What a pleasing art, The shadow that sneaked into the fire temple is undoubtedly Dedale. Wandering in the shinobi world, if there is any purpose, it is to find art that can move him, and this is also the reason why he sneaked into the fire temple." Stroking the bronze sculptures, looking at the ferocious and terrifying Wisdom King, or the kind and peaceful Buddha, Dedale suddenly became interested and quickly reached into the ninja bag on his waist. Using a mass of white explosive clay, he pinched out a lifelike Wisdom King and Buddha clay puppet. Holding a pile of explosive clay puppets in his palm, Dedale looked at the sculptures in the temple and said, "Art that can't explode is imperfect art, let me sublimate you, After saying that, Dedale threw a pile of explosive clay puppets in his hand around. The white clay puppets drew an arc in the air, and under the illumination of the flickering candlelight, the shadows projected on the wall looked like a group of demons dancing in the air. In the flickering light, the corners of Dedale's mouth rose, and he made a hand seal, ha! Boom! 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 In an instant, the roar resounded through the night sky, and the violent explosion almost instantly drowned the hall. In the soaring red light, the entire fire temple became red. What's going on? Is it an enemy attack? Quickly put out the fire. Quickly put out the fire. For a time, terrified cries and hurried shouts rose and fell. The originally tranquil and peaceful fire temple was suddenly plunged into a hubbub. The monks rushed out of their respective houses in group. Some picked up sticks to patrol the area, while others carried wooden buckets to help put out the fire. Amidst the bustling crowd, the #1 expert of the fire temple, Di Lu, frowned as he scanned the surroundings with his sharp eyes. Very soon, in an inconspicuous place in the temple, Earthworm found a footprint that was obviously different from that of the monks in the temple. "This is?" "Humph, as expected, a thief has sneaked into the temple." Di Lu's face darkened. He followed the footprints and disappeared from the temple in a flash. In the forest outside the fire temple, he turned around and glanced at the soaring flames behind him. He had already left the fire temple, but he was still immersed in the joy brought about by the explosion. Swish, accompanied by the sound of breaking wind, a monk of the fire temple suddenly appeared in front of Dedale. He was Di Lu, who had followed the footprints. Without waiting for Dedale to ask, Di Lu asked, "Who are you? Why did you commit such a crime in the fire temple?" Dedale shrugged his shoulders and said, "I was just appreciating the art." "Appreciating the art?" Di Lu was startled and immediately said angrily, "Don't tell me blowing up the temple is also appreciating the art? Don't quibble anymore, just give up." Dedale said as if it was a matter of course, explosions are art. Looking at Dedale's indifferent expression, Di Lu, who had once served as the daimyo of the fire country, felt a little uneasy from the bottom of his heart, so he said loudly, "I will never let a dangerous person like you run amok in the fire country." After saying that, Di Lu clasped his hands together, and his body exuded an indescribable aura. "Do you also want to see my art?" "Yes." Dedale smiled as he inserted his hands into the ninja bag on his waist. Di Lu said with regret, "I'm sorry, I can't control the power of this move. If you die in my hands, I will send you to the afterlife in front of the Buddha." With the eruption of Di Lu's chakra, a phantom of a bodhisattva was projected from his body. Feeling the tranquil chakra emanating from Di Lu's body, Dedale stopped what he was doing and was a bit absent-minded for a moment. He murmured, "So beautiful, what ninjutsu is this?" Seeing Dedale stop what he was doing, Di Lu didn't rush to launch an attack. Instead, he slowly explained, "This is the immortal talent that only monks of the fire temple can practice. Immortal Talent is a unique practice technique of the Fire Temple. Its essence is to combine the chakra in the ninja's body with the natural energy scattered in the air. Therefore, the immortal talent of the Fire Temple can, to a certain extent, be regarded as a branch of the immortal technique. In other words, it is a relatively shallow use of natural energy. Although the efficiency of the immortal talent of the Fire Temple is far inferior to the immortal technique of the three secret realms of Mount Myaboku, Ryuchi Cave, and Shikatsu Forest in terms of the use of natural energy, and it can't make the monks of the Fire Temple enter the immortal mode that truly transcends the mortal and immortal world. However, it also truly uses natural energy. Therefore, Di Lu, who mastered the immortal talent, was valued by the daimyo of the Land of Fire, and was selected as the famous 12 guardian ninja warriors. After staring at Di Lu for a long time, Dedail slowly said, "So, this is the real art of the Fire Temple. But what's missing?" What is missing? Di Lu's brows wrinkled even tighter. He felt that he and Dedail weren't on the same channel and couldn't communicate at all. At this time, Dedail took out 2 balls of explosive clay from the ninja bag on his waist and said, "Thank you for showing me your art. Now I will let you see my art." Looking at Dedail, who was immersed in his own narcissism, Di Lu suddenly thought of something and said in surprise, "Are you the traitorous ninja of the Rock Village, Dedail, who committed crimes everywhere in the shinobi world?" Dedail muttered, "Have you heard of me?" Di Lu's expression became more dignified. "Give up resistance, I will give you a fair trial." Dedail threw the primordial clay in his hand. In an instant, the primordial clay on the ground swelled up and turned into strange primordial clay dolls that flew towards the ground in all directions. Upon seeing this, Di Lu no longer hesitated and shouted in a low voice, "Come on, 1,000 hands kill!" In an instant, the Bodhisattva phantom behind Di Lu turned into an angry Wisdom King, and at the same time, countless phantom fists flew out and hit all the clay puppets that were rushing towards him. Di Lu said indifferently, "These are useless against me, just surrender." "Kacha!" Di Lu's voice had just fallen when the soil under his feet cracked open, and then, an explosive centipede broke out of the ground and quickly entangled Di Lu. Dedail showed a smile as if he had succeeded, and his hands also formed hand seals. Chapter 586. At this moment, Dedail felt that the whole world had turned scarlet, and the bright crescent moon hanging high in the night sky had also turned into a red full moon. Illusion! Dedail was taken aback. He immediately wanted to make a hand seal, but he was shocked to find that his body seemed to be nailed by several huge iron nails, and he couldn't move at all. Humph! With a light snort, Hyojin, who was wearing a flame-patterned mask, walked out of the wood. After receiving a message from the Ninja Crow and learning that Dedail might go to the Fire Temple, he immediately sneaked out of the village and flew all the way. Disregarding the cost of Chakra's consumption, he spent a whole day rushing to the Fire Temple and happened to see the scene of the fight between Terra and Dedail. Fortunately, he arrived in time. Otherwise, Terra, one of the 12 guardian ninja warriors, whose head was worth 30 million gold, would have died in the dazzling fireworks. At this time, Terra, who was bound by Dedail's exploding centipede, struggled to break free. He looked at Hyojin with surprise and asked vigilantly, You are Amatsukumi's fire demon?" Hyojin glanced at Terra and deliberately said, "You're welcome." After being reminded by Hyojin, Terra looked embarrassed and hurriedly said, "Thank you for saving me just now, Your Excellency." Out of curiosity about the 30 million gold bounty, Hyojin seriously sized up Terra. In fact, Terra's strength wasn't weak. He had at least the foundation of a Jonin, and coupled with the power of an immortal genius, his overall strength even surpassed some elite Jonins. In the original spacetime, when facing the undying duo of the Akatsuki organization, he had the upper hand at the beginning of the fight. However, a monk was still a monk and not a pure ninja. He was more rigid and less adaptable. Moreover, the ability of the undying duo of the Akatsuki organization was indeed too strange. In the end, it wasn't surprising that he died in the hands of the undying duo. Withdrawing his gaze, Hyojin said faintly, "You can leave now. I will deal with this guy." Seeing Hyojin adopt an unapproachable attitude, Terra pondered for a moment and finally chose to compromise. He left Dedale, who had blown up the temple hall, to Hyojin before turning around and leaving the forest to return to the fire temple. "Hey, what did you do to me?" At this time, Dedale's voice reached Hyojin's ears. Kuroto suddenly looked at Dedale, his face full of surprise under the flame mask. He didn't expect Dedale to show signs of getting rid of his genjutsu so quickly. Hyojin's eyes turned cold. Originally, the best candidate to deal with Dedale was Itachi or Jishue, who was proficient in genjutsu. In the original space-time, Itachi easily subdued Dedale with a glance and left an indelible mental scar on the genius of the Rock Village. But considering that the main purpose of this trip was to collect Dedale's cell tissue, and this matter was related to Hyojin's own top secret, he didn't want to let others handle it if it wasn't necessary. Therefore, he dispelled the idea of letting Itachi or Jishue take action and took action himself. As for using the fire release clone, it was also because he considered that it would be very troublesome to deal with Dedale in a conventional battle. Therefore, he wanted to copy Itachi's method of fighting Dedale. Using the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan on the fire release clone, he can use genjutsu to take care of the battle, which is both decent and allows him to extract Dedale's cell tissue. He can even use this to coerce Dedale to join Amatsukami, or develop Dedale into the second undercover agent of the Akatsuki organization. After all, he still appreciated Dedale. Apart from Dedale's strange hobby of being obsessed with explosions, Dedale's ability wasn't something many ninjas possessed. However, plans can never keep up with changes. The genjutsu that Hyojin used without hesitation just now unexpectedly showed signs of being broken by Dedale in just a few minutes. "Hey, I'm talking to you, hurry up and answer me, Dedale, who was trying to break free from the genjutsu, was still shouting. Seeing that Dedale's head could slightly move, Hyojin lightly spat. The genjutsu he used on Dedale was a kind of Sharingan genjutsu called Shackling Hang Technique. It was the same genjutsu that Itachi used to subdue Orochimaru in the original spacetime. The consciousness of the enemy who was hit by the Shackling Hang Technique will fall into the genjutsu space, as if a huge iron nail is nailed to the body, completely losing control of the body. According to common sense, this genjutsu that is cast with the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan as a medium should be more than enough to deal with Dedale in terms of pure pupil power. However, the power of genjutsu does not only depend on the strength of the pupil power. It seems that I really don't have a talent for genjutsu. After cursing in his heart, Hyojin took out a kunai from his ninja bag. After studying all types of ninjutsu, Hyojin found that his talent for genjutsu and spacetime ninjutsu is the worst, and it belongs to the kind of terrible kind. This is also the reason why Hyojin rarely uses genjutsu even if he has the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Of course, ninjas who really have a talent for genjutsu are actually only a small group in the ninja community. For example, when he had the Manjikyu Sharingan, Kakashi, like Hyojin, rarely used genjutsu. When encountering a strong enemy of the same level, he never used genjutsu to deal with the enemy. His use of the Manjikyu Sharingan of Obsidian was more for insight replication and genjutsu defense. Even in the Uchiha clan, not everyone is good at genjutsu. For example, Sasuke, who is extremely talented, is not very good at genjutsu. He belongs to the category of Uchiha who doesn't use genjutsu as much as possible. He is the opposite of his brother Itachi, who uses genjutsu to solve problems. He is the type of person who never uses genjutsu. Weighing the kunai in his hand, Hyojin suddenly threw it towards Dedale. Schwa, the kunai with a cold glint instantly cut Dedale's shoulder and nailed him to the tree trunk behind him with a piece of flesh and blood. Dedale was suddenly shocked and angry. "Damn, you despicable guy!" Glancing at the kunai nailed to the tree trunk, Kuroto's face showed a smile under the mask. The kunai had cut off half of Dedale's shoulder. That small piece of flesh and blood is enough for him to extract Dedale's cell tissue. His main purpose has been achieved. Hyojin, who was relieved, said coldly, "I will now give you a choice. Join our Amatsukami or die." Chapter 587. Looking at Dedale's face that was distorted to the point of madness, Hyojin suddenly had a bad feeling. In the vision of his eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, the chakra on Dedale's body was rapidly expanding, like a bomb that was about to explode. The plot shouldn't be like this, right? Hyojin's face darkened, and only such a thought flashed in his mind. Boom, 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 in a split second, in a dazzling white light that seemed to tear open the entire night sky, an explosive sound suddenly exploded. Immediately after, a burst of air waves spread out in all directions, and at the same time, the earth trembled violently as if it was the end of the world. Chiriku, who was on the way back to the fire temple, suddenly turned his head. But before he could react, he was caught off guard, and his whole body was sent flying by the air waves until he hit a big tree. Only then did he manage to stop his body. Climbing up from the ground in embarrassment, he looked at the fire in the distance with a dull expression. What happened? The site of the explosion was the place where he had intercepted the rock-hidden village's traitor Dedale, but he couldn't imagine that a fight between two ninjas could cause such a big movement. This was simply inconceivable to him. At the same time, he was secretly glad that he didn't insist on staying on the battlefield, otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. In the messy forest, cough, cough, Hyojin stood up from the ground, coughing lightly as he removed the golden Susanoo. At this moment, what entered his eyes were the tiny ashes that were still burning in the air, as well as the flickering flames that were scattered all over the place. Cell tissue. Hyojin hurriedly looked in the direction of the big tree that had nailed the kunai, but there was only a small section of the tree that was still burning. The piece of Dedale's flesh that had been cut off by the kunai had already turned into flying ash in the explosion, and even the kunai, which was forged from fine steel, had melted into a small black lump of iron in the high temperature of the deflagration. Hyojin immediately gnashed his teeth. "Dedale, you bastard, are you deliberately targeting me?" It had clearly been an illusion suppression. Itachi had only needed a glance and a few words to thoroughly subdue Dedale. But when it came to Hyojin, Dedale had actually self-destructed. Hyojin really couldn't understand why the difference was so big. A normal person like me really can't figure out the thoughts of a madman. After cursing under his breath, Hyojin looked at the forest that was almost flattened by the explosion and slowly frowned. Although the explosion just now was fierce, the scope of the impact seemed to be much smaller than Hyojin imagined, and the power seemed to be a little less. After Hyojin activated Susanoo, he easily blocked it. Something's wrong. In the distant sky. Sitting cross-legged on the clay owl, Dedale supported his chin with his hand and said, "That guy should be a member of Amatsukami, the organization that caused a sensation in the shinobi world. The mask on his face has a flame pattern. Is he the Homasubi of their organization? I heard that the two Homasubi of Amatsukami are Uchiha with Manjikyu Sharingan. Heh, the genjutsu of the Uchiha clan is only mediocre, huh?" He had long heard about the genjutsu of the Mai Uchiha clan in the village, how to deal with Uchiha in a one-on-one battle, and how to deal with Uchiha with Manjikyu Sharingan. But after seeing it today, Dedale felt that the elders in the village were exaggerating. Uchiha's genjutsu was nothing special. Dedale was a little proud for a moment. Wasn't Uchiha with Manjikyu Sharingan also dealt with by me? In front of my explosion, which can be called art, Sharingan isn't worth mentioning, huh? While thinking, Dedale felt that the night sky around him seemed to have suddenly become a lot brighter, and a warning sign appeared in his heart. Swish, just as Dedale sensed something, a flaming longsword fiercely chopped down from above. He barely managed to lean to the side and narrowly avoided the slash of the flaming longsword, but the clay owl he was sitting on was cut in two by the flaming longsword. After losing his mount, Dedale, who was floating in the air, opened his eyes in disbelief and stared at the majestic and complete Susanoo in the air. Inside the Susanoo, Hyojin coldly said, "You were laughing just now, right? You wouldn't be naive enough to think that I would be killed by your lame trick, right?" Dedale, who was shocked by Hyojin's Susanoo, froze for a while before realizing that he was still falling. So, he hurriedly inserted his hand into the ninja bag at his waist and took out a clay bird to avoid falling to his death and safely land on the ground. At this time, Hyojin also rode the glittering Susanoo to land in front of Dedale and slashed his sword at Dedale. Boom! The huge flaming sword fiercely slashed down, leaving a deep gully on the ground. Dedale, who had used the body flicker technique to avoid it, looked excited. "This is your Uchiha clan's Susanoo? It's really fascinating, but my art is also." Swish! Without waiting for Dedale to finish his words, Hyojin's figure flashed and he directly separated from the Susanoo, launched the body flicker technique, and suddenly appeared in front of Dedale. The kunai in his hand instantly slashed down. At this time, Dedale's attention was completely focused on the dazzling Susanoo, and he didn't expect Hyojin to use this move. He could only barely raise his arms to protect his face. Hua! A cold light flashed and blood splashed. The kunai in Hyojin's hand easily slashed Dedale's arm that was protecting his face, and cut off a large piece of flesh. Dedale didn't care about the injury on his arm and hurriedly retreated. While retreating, he threw small clay spiders. Looking at Dedale, who was fleeing in panic, Kuroto didn't rush to chase after him, but quietly put the flesh and blood of Dedale into his wide sleeve, and immediately returned to Susanoo with a sway of his body. At this time, countless small clay spiders jumped towards Hyojin's Susanoo. Dedale, who was fleeing, saw this scene and hurriedly made a hand seal. Ha! Boom, boom, boom! In an instant, all the small clay spiders that jumped towards Hyojin exploded violently. However, the smoke quickly dissipated, and the undamaged Susanoo came into Dedale's eyes again, which made him frightened. Inside the Susanoo, the corners of Hyojin's mouth rose, and he thought, the clay clone really has its own uniqueness. Just now, his eternal Manjikyu Sharingan captured a familiar wave frequency of chakra, which was almost exactly the same as when he was in the forest before. So, he could conclude that the Dedale in front of him at this moment wasn't Dedale's main body, but a clay clone cleverly replaced by Dedale taking advantage of the explosion of the small clay spiders. Chapter 588. Dedale's clay clone is, to a certain extent, even more difficult to distinguish than ordinary shadow clones. Because whether it is his main body or his clay clone, the violent chakra fluctuations inside them are far beyond the scope of ordinary ninjas, and this extremely violent chakra attribute naturally covers up the details of chakra fluctuations, making it difficult to distinguish the authenticity from the fake by relying on experience. Previously, Hyojin made a mistake and was almost fooled by Dedale. It must be known that Hyojin, who is controlling the fire clone, not only has a pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan with amazing insight, but he also has a wealth of experience in distinguishing various cloning techniques. But even so, he still made a mistake. It can be seen that Dedale's clay clone has reached the point of passing off the fake as the real one in all aspects. At this time, Dedale's clay clone retreated while asking, "Hey, I don't have any enmity with your Amatsukami, why are you looking for trouble with me?" Inside the Susanoo, Hyojin's tone was indifferent. "Stop acting, do you think you can deceive me twice with this trick?" After saying that, Hyojin snapped his fingers lightly. whoosh. In an instant, countless golden flames rose in the surroundings without warning. This is the Muji Flame Release Kekai ninjutsu that Hyojin developed not long ago. Once activated, it can instantly create a sea of fire in an area with a radius of 30 meters with Hyojin as the center. Inside the Hell Lotus, Dedale's clay clone immediately melted and deformed, its structure was destroyed, and it lost the ability to explode, turning into a mass of useless soft mud. In the distance, Dedale's main body, who was hiding underground, broke out of the ground and drilled his head out of the ground. He looked at Hyojin, who was bathed in the golden sea of fire under the Susanoo and looked like a god of fire. Can burning also be so beautiful? Soon after, Dedale covered his eyes and angrily said, "No, how can I be obsessed with other people's art? Explosions are the ultimate art." But despite saying that, Dedale still couldn't help looking at Hyojin through the gap between his fingers and exclaimed, "Such extreme power, as expected of Amatsukumi's Balrog. Damn, just you wait, I'll let you witness my ultimate art one day." After making up his mind, Dedale immediately shrunk into the hole and hastily used Earth Dragon concealment to flee into the distance in a sorry state. In the field. "I'll let you off this time. Consider it as me returning the favor for using your cells. If I meet you again, humph." Sensing Dedale's chakra fading away, Hyojin didn't pursue. He only snorted and extinguished the surrounding golden flames before withdrawing the Susanoo above his head. As far as he was concerned, collecting Dedale's cells was the highest priority. As for everything else, it was secondary. And if he forces Dedale, that lunatic might really self-destruct. In a situation where his own genjutsu can't completely subdue the other party, Hyojin isn't willing to take such unnecessary risk. It must be known that in the shinobi world, capsivity and caution are always the most valuable qualities of a ninja. A few days later, Dedale, who had escaped from the land of fire, crawled out of the ground and wiped the dust off his body while sighing with emotion. "Amatsukumi is really powerful. It seems that the equally famous Akatsuki isn't easy to deal with. It's better to avoid these troublesome guys in the future." At this time, 3 figures wearing red clothes and bamboo hats came from the road. They are none other than Uchiha, Shinichi, Kakuzu, and Sasori of the Akatsuki. Shinichi took off the bamboo hat on his head, revealing the Sharingan in his eye sockets as he said lazily, "Hey, are you Rock Village's Dedale? You bastard, you really made us look for you. Join our Akatsuki." Without waiting for Shinichi to finish speaking, Dedale in front of him rapidly expanded, as if about to explode. Huh! Shinichi, Kakuzu, and Sasori were taken aback and were completely at a loss. Boom! Boom! In an instant, a huge explosion resounded throughout the world, coupled with the sweeping shock waves. The surroundings were in a mess as if they had just experienced a level 10 storm. After a long time, the smoke of the explosion slowly dissipated. Shinichi half knelt on the ground, panting heavily while putting away the Susanoo that was destroyed by the explosion, and cursed, "Is there something wrong with this guy's brain? Why did he self-destruct as soon as we met? Fuck, I haven't even finished speaking." Sasori, who crawled out of the blown-up Filiu, said coldly, "Don't complain, hurry up and look for Kakuzu, I hope he is still alive." Shinichi looked around and muttered, "All of them are broken into pieces, how can we find him?" Sasori also looked unlucky and was somewhat puzzled. The intelligence said that Dedale is just a little obsessed with explosions. It didn't say that he can't be communicated with. How can this be? Kacha. At this time, a crack appeared on the ground, and then Kakuzu crawled out of the ground, cutting a sorry figure. At this time, Kakuzu's red cloud robe was barely hanging on his body, and 3 of the 4 masks on his back were completely broken. Only the brown earth attribute chakra mask wasn't completely broken, but looking carefully, it was also covered with many fine cracks. Shinichi was a little surprised. Huh? He didn't die? Kakuzu's face turned black and he fiercely said, "That guy's heart is mine. Sasori nodded. There's no need to recruit this kind of lunatic into the organization, it's better to get rid of him. In the distance, Deadale, who once again escaped with the help of the clay clone's self-destruction, drilled out of the ground and said, "What's going on? Why am I so unlucky recently, encountering troublesome guys one after another?" Considering that the clay clone's self-destruction might not be able to deal with the 3 people from Akatsuki, Deadale quickly took out a clay bird. Originally, he was quite confident in the power of his clay clone's self-destruction, but the previous battle with Homasubi of Amatsukami gave him a big blow, so he is now a little frightened. Jumping on the clay bird and flying high into the sky, he didn't forget to look around, alert for possible surprise attacks, until he was far away from the area where the previous battle took place. Only then did he breathe a long sigh of relief. "TSK, the shinobi world is getting more and more dangerous, it's better to go back to the village and hide." After thinking for a moment, Deadale decided not to continue wandering around, but to immediately return to the rock village. Chapter 589. After obtaining Deadale's cell tissue, Hyojin switched back to his escape body in a secluded place and directly entered the Tenseigan chakra mode. He flew all the way and quickly returned to the Sky Fortress on the eastern sea of the Nation of Fire. "Welcome back, sir." As soon as Hyojin returned to the Sky Fortress, Gaara and Xiang Lin came out to greet him and respectfully saluted him. Hyojin's expression changed. His figure flickered, and he appeared in front of Gaara and punched. Gaara instinctively jumped back, and the special sand that he had been practicing to control appeared in front of him, blocking Hyojin's fist. Bang! His fist hit the ball of sand, producing a low muffled sound. Hyojin was slightly surprised. That was because when his fist hit the sand mass, it was as if he had hit a hard wall, and his momentum was suddenly blocked. Withdrawing his fist with a smile, Hyojin praised Gaara. "Not bad. It seems that you haven't been slacking off these days." Hyojin had used about 10% of his body's strength in that punch just now, which was equivalent to an ordinary Chunin's attack. Gaara's reaction was very good, and his body reacted accordingly almost at the instant he launched the attack. It could be seen that Gaara had been maintaining a high training intensity. Otherwise, his body wouldn't have been able to have such a good reaction ability. What surprised Hyojin even more was that Gaara's sand control speed was obviously much faster than before. One must know that at this time, the one-tailed Shouja in Eira's body has been completely sealed by Suijin. In other words, Eira's Jinchuriki can no longer use even a little bit of chakra from the Shouja inside his body, but even so, his speed of sand control has not regressed. Instead, it has improved significantly, indicating that he has really put in a lot of effort during this period of time. Ailer, who was rarely praised, blushed and said shyly, "My lord, you're overpraising me." Hyojin smiled and evaluated in his heart. "Show he is sealed, so I have lost the ability to use Rampage, and my destructive power has plummeted. My combat power should only be at the level of a Chunin. If I encounter an experienced Chunin, the probability of losing is probably more than 80%. If he were to fight with Sasuke now, perhaps Sasuke would have a better chance of winning." Even without Shouja's power, Gaara was still one of the best among his peers. It was just that after being defeated by Kimimaro and being kidnapped by the Akatsuki, Sasuke's growth was extremely fast. He couldn't be compared to Sasuke in the original spacetime. So, if Gaara were to fight against Sasuke, Hyojin would favor Sasuke. At this time, Kuroto moved his gaze towards Xiang Lin on the side. Seeing Hyojin looking at her, Xiang Lin quickly said, "My lord, look at how thin I am. You know I'm not slacking off." Kuroto was overjoyed when he heard that. He smiled and said, "Cultivate well. I will find some opponents of the same age for you in a while. I will let you know what a true genius is like." Gaara hurriedly said, "My lord, I won't let you down." Hyojin nodded and didn't say anything else. He walked past the two children and entered the laboratory. Walking around the laboratory, looking around at the dazzling array of new equipment and instruments, Kuroda felt a burst of joy from the bottom of his heart. Including the 50 million Ryu from the Danzo trade and the 265 million Ryu that Mai was going to pay, Hyojin had earned more than 300 million Ryu. With such a huge amount of money that an ordinary person wouldn't be able to spend in several lifetimes, Hyojin immediately started spending lavishly. One must know that because of the lack of funds before, most of the instruments in his laboratory are second-hand goods from the black market. Many of them are about to be eliminated or have some missing functions. Now that he has the money, and the name of Amatsukami has also become famous, there are a lot more import channels, so naturally, Kuroda wouldn't mistreat himself anymore, so he immediately upgraded and transformed the laboratory. As the money flowed out like water, brand new and advanced instruments appeared in his laboratory one after another, causing his laboratory to be upgraded by 2 or 3 levels. Today, although his laboratory is not as large as the laboratory in the Danzo root base, the advanced level of the equipment is not inferior to the laboratory in the Danzo root base. At least in the field of biotechnology, his laboratory can be regarded as the most advanced laboratory in the shinobi world. Coming to the cell culture room, Hyojin carried out a preliminary treatment on the piece of Dedale's flesh he just obtained, and then collected a sample of Dedale's cell tissue from it. Using the newly purchased incubator, he began to cultivate the cell's activity. After some research, Hyojin changed the previous process of cell fusion. Instead of directly carrying out the cell fusion experiment, he first cultivated the cell's activity and improved the cell's activity. When the cell's activity is at its peak, he can start the cell fusion experiment. In this way, the success rate of cell fusion can be increased by at least 3%. Don't underestimate this 3% success rate. After hundreds or thousands of experiments, a 3% success rate often means that no matter how serious the conflict between the two groups of cells is, there will inevitably be cases of successful fusion. This can not only greatly reduce the cost of money and time for cell fusion, but it can also improve the cell activity after cell fusion, making the clone body have a more perfect physique. And the better the physique of the clone body, the lower the difficulty for Hyojin to develop it. For example, the Type A wind release clone body that he accidentally obtained that showed signs of atavism almost didn't need him to develop it. It met his requirements and even exceeded his requirements, so he had to go back and improve the strength of the previous water release clone and fire release clone in order to maintain the strength balance between the clones. The estimated success rate of cell fusion is 4%. Looking at the value displayed on the newly purchased cell matching instrument, Hyojin slightly frowned. The new fusion process can increase the basic success rate by 3%, but the final success rate estimated by the instrument is only a mere 4%. This undoubtedly means that Dedale's cell tissue is not very compatible with Hyojin's cell tissue. In other words, it's only slightly better than the Uchiha clan's cell tissue and Hyojin's cell tissue. However, this is also reasonable because Hyojin, or rather, the Hyuga clan cell tissue, contains a large amount of gentler Yin release chakra, which is very normal for it to not be compatible with the overly violent fire chakra and earth release chakra. Fortunately, with the new cell fusion process and new equipment, with a basic success rate, Kuroda did not have to repeat the endless failure experience when he fused with the Uchiha clan's cell tissue. Chapter 590. Because Dedale is in the puberty period of his body, his cell tissues have strong vitality, so he doesn't need to cultivate them for too long. At most, it will take a week or so for his cell tissues to be ready for the cell fusion experiment. Therefore, after setting the cultivation period on the cell incubator, Hyojin slowly left the cell incubator. Walking out of the cell incubator, Hyojin's eyes naturally fell on the long row of brand new large nutrition tanks in front of him. These large nutrition tanks are newly purchased by Hyojin. Compared to the previous old models, these new nutrition tanks have better performance and are more stable. Because of the abundance of funds on hand, Hyojin eliminated all the old large nutrition tanks in the laboratory and purchased a total of 16 of these Shinobi World's most advanced large nutrition tanks at one time. 6 of them are used to store clones of the 6 chakra attributes, such as the water clone and the wind clone. At this moment, they are soaking in the latest large nutrition tank. As for the remaining 10, he is going to use them to cultivate clones in the early stage. In this way, he doesn't have to cultivate 2 clones at a time like before. With these 10 new large nutrition tanks, he can cultivate a total of 10 clones at a time, and the higher the base number, the higher the probability of producing high-quality clones. In the future, he can carefully select the best clone among the 10 clones to develop. Afterward, Hyojin checked the situation of the water clone and the wind clone. The water clone is in a stable state, there is no abnormality, and the wind clone's blood disease has also been controlled after the blood exchange treatment. However, from the analysis of the data detected by the instrument, the effect of the blood exchange treatment will get worse and worse. In the first few times, the blood exchange treatment may last for a month, but after a few times, the blood exchange treatment may only last for 20 days or even shorter. In other words, even if the blood exchange treatment is used to maintain the wind clone regardless of the cost, the wind clone will have its limit. As for how long this limit is, it is very difficult for Hyojin to accurately calculate. It may be 2 or 3 years, or maybe 4 or 5 years. In short, before he makes further breakthroughs in biotechnology, his wind clone will always be in danger of being scrapped. After a busy day, Hyojin finally left the laboratory and returned to the village. After quietly replacing the shadow clone in the principal's office, Suijin briefly recalled the memories of the shadow clone of the past 2 days. In the 2 days that he was away, everything was as usual. Nothing major happened. The school was still playing the drama of Naruto challenging Sasuke and then being beaten by Sasuke. The only difference was that there was an unfamiliar face among Sasuke's challengers. This unfamiliar face was none other than the 7-tailed Jinchuriki Lifu who had just arrived in Mai. The result was naturally self-evident. In the case of not transforming into a tailed beast, Lifu was not an opponent of Sasuke who had awakened his Sharingan. Just like Naruto, she was easily defeated by Sasuke. However, Lifu's personality is somewhat similar to that of Naruto. She is also a careless and casual person, so as a loser who challenged Sasuke, she quickly became acquainted with Naruto, Xiaoli, Chusi, and others and became a member of the Losers' Alliance. After reading all the memories of the Shadow Clone, Hyojin grinned. In fact, because there is a large number of experienced teachers and staff, Hyojin, as the headmaster, actually only needs to be responsible for the general direction of decision-making. Some daily teaching tasks have nothing to do with him at all. In addition, he has made a lot of emergency plans in advance, so leaving a shadow clone in the school is enough to deal with most of the daily affairs in the ninja school. Getting up and coming to the window, looking at the noisy playground below and the students playing on the playground, Hyojin pondered for a moment, and then immediately summoned a group of teachers and staff and held a temporary meeting. In the meeting room, Hyojin glanced at the teachers and staff and said, "I think the progress of teaching is still too slow. This is a ninja school, not a playground." The instructors sitting around the conference table were startled when they heard this. The progress of this year's students' teaching has actually accelerated a lot under the promotion of Hyojin. If he continues to improve the teaching speed, then the course will soon be finished. After all, the ninja school only teaches the most basic 3-body technique, as well as some basic skills such as tracking, patrolling, and searching that a genin needs to master. Irika asked, Headmaster, with the current teaching speed, the students will be able to graduate in 2 years. It is simply not enough to support 3 years of teaching time. If we speed up, what will we teach in the future? Irika asked the doubts of all the teachers and staff, and everyone looked at Hyojin. Hyojin waved his hand. You don't have to worry about this. I will apply to Naruto-sama and several elders to add some D-class and C-class ninjutsu to the teaching scope of the ninja school. What? Everyone was taken aback. Even in a great shinobi village like Mai, the channels of learning ninjutsu are very limited. Most of the ninjutsu that the ninjas practice is provided by their respective families. If an ordinary civilian ninja wants to practice ninjutsu, they either have to sacrifice their life to achieve military exploits, or they have to become a disciple of an excellent ninja and learn ninjutsu through a master-disciple relationship. In short, the basic problem of learning ninjutsu for civilian ninjas has been left far behind by the ninjas of the noble shinobi clan. This is also the case that several generations of Naruto shinobi have established a relatively complete set of master-disciple system. If there is no master-disciple system established by several generations of Naruto shinobi, then civilian ninjas would have no chance to get ahead. However, suppressing civilian ninjas and monopolizing the resources of ninjutsu is the consensus of all noble shinobi clans. This is also the reason why the ninja school only teaches the most basic three-body technique. If the ninja school opens up D-class and C-class ninjutsu to the students, it will not only affect the interests of the noble shinobi clan, but it will also have an impact on the reward and punishment system established by the village. After all, many D-class and C-class ninjutsu are the rewards given by the village to the meritorious personnel. If the ninja school teaches them for free, then these rewards will no longer be attractive. Jishui wondered, will the village agree? As a member of the noble Uchiha clan, Jishui is very clear about how much resistance there will be to this proposal of Hyojin. I am afraid that even within the Hyuga clan, there will be many people who will oppose it. I will deal with this matter, you don't have to worry about it. After a pause, Hyojin continued, this month, I want all the students to learn one of the three-body technique, and the results of the assessment at the end of the month will be posted on the display board outside the school. In the future, this will become a regular practice, every month there will be a test, and every month there will be a display. Guy's face turned black, and he seemed to think of something and muttered, is it necessary to be so strict? Hyojin smiled and said, if those kids don't want to be the last one, then they should work hard. As a result, the number of people challenging Sasuke on campus had decreased, and the playground was no longer as lively as it used to be. At the same time, after some internal struggle, Danzo finally accepted Orochimaru's proposal and was ready to let Orochimaru carry out a comprehensive transformation of his body. Perhaps in order to keep Orochimaru in check, Danzo sent an invitation to Amatsukami, inviting Homasubi to observe this transformation operation. Kuroto, who received the invitation, naturally readily agreed. He has long been envious of Orochimaru's human body modification technology, but he also knows that it is difficult to learn the essence of Orochimaru's human body modification technology just by watching the operation. On the day of the operation, Hyojin changed into the fire release clone and came to the root base early. After everything was ready, the transformation operation soon began. In this temporary operating room, in addition to Danzo and Orochimaru, who was in charge of the operation, there was also the chief research officer of the root base, Hyojin, who was dressed in Amatsukami's uniform, and 2 of Danzo's guards. There were a total of 4 bystanders, and the many bystanders didn't seem to affect the chief surgeon Orochimaru. He neatly manipulated the various surgical instruments and began the transformation operation. Danzo's body is already old, this is an unavoidable fact. Therefore, the transformation of Danzo's body can't be too radical. Otherwise, with Danzo's physique, it will either die from the rampaging of the primogenitor cells or the failure of its own organs. Because of this, Orochimaru first injected a large amount of fusion fluid into Danzo's body, trying to further strengthen the fusion of the primogenitor cells and the Sharingan. This is because only by truly fusing the primogenitor cells and the Sharingan's Yang chakra and Yin chakra, the body will have the power of the universe, and the strength will be increased. Orochimaru didn't see the stone tablet left by the Six-Path Sage in Uchiha-naka Shrine, but this didn't prevent him from understanding the importance of the Yin and Yang fusion from the balance of the chakra. As a large amount of fusion fluid was injected, Danzo suddenly screamed in pain. In the operation room, the two guards of Danzo suddenly became nervous, and they glared at Orochimaru. At this time, Hyojin stopped the two guards of Danzo. This is a normal human reaction, don't make a fuss. Although the specific composition of Orochimaru's fusion fluid is not known, the function of fusion fluid is to suppress the human body's rejection and accelerate the fusion of the transplanted cells or flesh with the body. And rejection is a biological instinct of the human body. Forcibly suppressing the instinct will naturally cause a certain degree of harm and pain to the body. This is unavoidable. After a long time, Danzo's screams gradually subsided, and his body also showed changes. The most obvious is the part of the body that was transplanted with the flesh and blood of the first generation. The wrinkles on the surface have faded a lot, and the skin has become smoother. The whole body seems to be 10 years younger. At this time, under the flame pattern mask, Hyojin has opened the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets, and because of the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, some of the subtle changes in Danzo's body were all seen by his eyes. It can't be wrong. This is the power of the boundless nature, Hyojin secretly sighed. Before, the Yin chakra and the Yang chakra in Danzo's body were in a state of balance, so Danzo had to be very careful. He used the Sharingan to suppress the first-generation cells, and also used the first-generation cells to suppress the Sharingan. And now, the Yin chakra and the Yang chakra in Danzo's body have begun the initial fusion, producing the power of the universe, so the whole state of Danzo's body has changed dramatically. Of course, because it is the initial fusion, the power of the universe is very weak, not to mention compared to Nagato, even compared to Jishui, it is still a world of difference. Chapter 592. Thump. Thump. At this moment, the pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in Hyojin's eye sockets suddenly pulsated like a heartbeat. This feeling, quietly holding his forehead with his hand, Kuroto secretly sensed the changes in his body. After the surgery where Jishui transplanted the Hashirama chakra, the pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan that had initially fused with the Hashirama cells has obviously become more alive than before. There was no doubt that the sudden pulsation just now was caused by this living characteristic. And the reason for this might be that the weak power of Genzen generated in Danzo's body resonated instinctively with the pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan that also possesses a small amount of the power of Genzen. At this time, Orochimaru said proudly, "This is the normal reaction after fusing with the Hashirama cells. It's amazing." The chief research officer of the route and the two guards of Danzo saw that Danzo's body has undergone earth-shaking changes. In the blink of an eye, Danzo's body has become full of vitality, so they were all amazed. Unlike Hyojin, other people in the operating room can't feel the power of the Yin and Yang fusion, but they can see the huge changes in Danzo's body through the most basic naked eye observation. Temporarily suppressing the restlessness of the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets, Hyojin observed the various instruments beside the operating table and found that after the fusion of the Yin and Yang chakra, other than the heart rhythm, Danzo's body on the operating table has gradually returned to the normal range. Hyojin frowned. Orochimaru's fusion fluid seems to be more effective than the fusion fluid I developed. Compared with Jishui, Danzo's physique is worse and more declining, but even so, Orochimaru's fusion fluid allowed Danzo's physique to complete the initial yin and yang fusion. This undoubtedly shows that the effect of Orochimaru's fusion fluid is far more effective than the fusion fluid developed by Hyojin. Cough. In a burst of rapid coughing, Danzo gradually regained consciousness on the operating table. The two guards of Danzo quickly approached and asked with concern, "Naruto-sama, are you okay?" Danzo supported his body and sat up, completely ignoring the concern of the two guards, feeling the changes in his body. After a long time, he said to Orochimaru, "Very good, Orochimaru, you didn't fail this old man's trust." Orochimaru smiled and said, "How do you feel?" Danzo's face showed a rare smile. "Better than ever, I feel like I'm 30 years old again." Hyojin timely said, "Don't be too happy, this is just the initial fusion, this is the effect that all people who successfully transplanted the first-generation cells should have." The hidden meaning of Hyojin's words was, "Don't be too proud, this is the change of your body, this is the effect that all people who successfully transplanted the first-generation cells will have. You didn't have this before because your transplanting skills are not up to standard." The happy expression on Danzo's face suddenly turned black when he heard Orochimaru's words. If it weren't for the fact that he was still on the operating table and needed the help of Amatsukami to keep Orochimaru in check, Danzo would have already lost his cool and would have directly turned against Homasubi. At this time, Orochimaru took out a pure white arm from a freezer in the operating room. There was no doubt that this arm was the arm that Hyojin cut off from White Setsu's body. In order to hand this arm to Danzo, Hyojin cleverly lured the ninja of Root to the place where the arm was lost, so that Root could get this arm. Danzo, who is used to speculating about others with the greatest malice, naturally also suspected the origin of this arm. But after testing, the researchers of Root were surprised to find that this white arm not only contains the first-generation cells, but also some special substances. This special substance plays a very good role in calming the first-generation cells, and can greatly restrain the manic vitality of the first-generation cells. It is of very advanced biotechnology. Glancing at the arm in Orochimaru's hand, Danzo still looked a little hesitant. Orochimaru laughed and said, "What Homasubi just said is right, your body has only completed the initial fusion. If you want to further explore the abilities of the Hashirama cells, you have to transplant this broken arm. Moreover, after removing the arm of Uchiha Shin, your body will be purer, and the chakra attribute will be more balanced." At this time, Danzo stretched out his withered right hand full of Sharingan and said in a deep voice, "Can you guarantee that the first-generation cells in this old man's body won't go berserk during the transplant process? To transplant the right arm of Uchiha Shin, it is necessary to first remove the Sharingan inlaid right arm of Uchiha Shin, and the Sharingan inlaid on his right arm is the key that Danzo uses to suppress the first-generation cells in his body, so he is worried that when he removes the right arm of Uchiha Shin, the first-generation cells in his body will quickly go berserk and completely devour him. Don't worry, the previous step has allowed your body to integrate with the first-generation cells, so even if you temporarily lose the Sharingan, as long as you don't overdraw the chakra in your body, the first-generation cells will not easily go berserk." Orochimaru's tone is very firm. Danzo looked at Orochimaru and said, "Orochimaru, as long as this old man succeeds, there will be a place for you in the shinobi world in the future." Orochimaru smiled and said, "I am looking forward to it." Danzo gently nodded and said, "Then let's begin." Orochimaru no longer talked nonsense and immediately began the disassembly of Danzo's original arm and the transplantation of the new arm. This surgery may seem complicated, but in fact, it is not difficult at all. Even any medical ninja in my hospital would be able to perform this surgery, because whether it is Shin Uchiha Shin's arm or the arm of White Zetsu Shin, they are very high-quality transplanted limbs, and the rejection of the host is very low, especially in the case of Danzo Shin's initial integration with the first-generation cells. The success rate of the surgery is even higher. During the surgery, Hyojin noticed that only 7 of the 10 vacancies on Danzo's arm had Sharingan, and the remaining 3 were empty. If the one in his eye socket is counted, it means that there are only 8 Sharingan in Danzo's body. It seems that Danzo's stock of Sharingan has been exhausted. When the Uchiha clan was still alive, the Sharingan in Danzo's root collection was all collected from the corpses of the Uchiha clansmen who died in the Third Shinobi World War, so the stock is not much. Plus Hyojin and Obsidian jointly raided the root secret vault, and Obsidian took away part of the stock, so the Sharingan in Danzo's body is probably the only Sharingan in his body right now. Mobile version of the fastest updated website. Chapter 593. It only took Orochimaru 30 minutes to transplant the whole arm, which also included the transplanting of the Sharingan from the old arm to the new arm. His skill was so high that it dazzled and stunned the onlookers. After transplanting White Zetsu's arm, Orochimaru once again injected a tube of fusion fluid into Danzo. Soon, another ghastly wail echoed in the operating room. Watching Danzo rolling on the operating table in pain, his 2 guards wiped the cold sweat off their forehead. As Danzo's most trusted subordinate, in the eyes of these 2 guards, Danzo was always the gloomy and meticulous leader of the roots. They had never seen Danzo lose his composure like this. Hyojin squinted his eyes and said, "It seems that Orochimaru's fusion fluid is not without side effects. It can make Danzo wail like this. I'm afraid ordinary people can't bear this kind of pain." After a long time, the Danzo on the operating table gradually stopped. Looking at Danzo with snot and tears running down his face, Orochimaru smiled and said, "How do you feel?" Danzo panted and growled, "Damn it! Why did my body have such a big reaction this time? Didn't you promise me that the operation would go smoothly?" Orochimaru put away the smile on his face and explained in a serious tone, "Any subversive cell fusion will be accompanied by the death of countless old cells. The closer your body fuses with the Hashirama cells, the closer you will be to the body of Hashirama cells, because your own cell tissue has no competitiveness in front of the Hashirama cells." Danzo frowned and said, "What do you mean?" Orochimaru smiled and said, "In the past 45 minutes, 99% of the cells in your body have experienced a violent death and division. In a sense, you are a completely different person from 45 minutes ago. In other words, at the cellular level, you have just completed a body replacement, replacing your original body with a body that is closer to the Hashiramas." Danzo was instantly furious. "In a short period of 40 to 50 minutes, all the cells in your body will be replaced. Why didn't you tell me such a huge risk before?" Orochimaru shrugged and said, "If I told you, your probability of surviving the fusion will drop by 5%. Danzo stared coldly at Orochimaru, and the killing intent in his eyes could not be concealed. "I don't want this to happen again, Orochimaru. Do you understand?" Ignoring Danzo's threat, Orochimaru asked, "Do you feel the changes in your body?" Danzo clenched his fist and felt for a while, and said slowly, "The chakra's amount seems to have increased again, and the increase is not small," and, as he said that, Danzo covered his right eye. Orochimaru asked anxiously, "And what?" At this time, Hyojin said lightly, "The pupil power of your Sharingan should have increased a lot, right?" Danzo looked at Hyojin vigilantly. "How do you know?" Hyojin curled his lips and didn't bother to answer Danzo's question. There is no doubt that the White Zetsu's cell organization has a strengthening effect on the Sharingan. The best example is Obsidian, who has half of his body sutured with white Zetsu cells. So when Danzo covered his eye, Hyojin guessed that the Sharingan in his eye socket must have undergone a tremendous change, so he couldn't adapt to it for a while. But in Danzo's right eye socket, there is only one Samagatama Sharingan, and the strength of the Yin chakra contained in the Samagatama Sharingan is limited, even if it is strengthened by the Yang chakra contained in the cells of the first generation. The probability of a qualitative change is not high. But with Kakashi, who is not an Uchiha clansman, and the transplanted Samagatama Sharingan evolved into a special case of Manjikyu Sharingan, Hyojin can't guarantee that the Samagatama Sharingan in Danzo's eye socket will not undergo a qualitative change. After a moment of adaptation, Danzo restrained the joy in his heart and said to Orochimaru, "Very good, I am very satisfied with the results of this operation." Orochimaru stretched out his tongue and licked his lips, and said with a smile, "You don't think that the operation is over, do you?" Danzo was startled for a moment and asked, "Are there any other steps?" "No. It's not that there are other steps, it's just that the body transformation hasn't started at all." Orochimaru smiled and showed a fanatical look. Looking at the crazy expression on Orochimaru's face, Danzo's heart skipped a beat, and he said in surprise, "Is it possible that the previous operation was just the preparation work before the body transformation?" Orochimaru raised the scalpel and said excitedly, "If I didn't carry out the previous operation, how could your body survive my body transformation? The next step is the field that I am really good at." Not to mention Danzo on the operating table, even Hyojin on the side shuddered when he saw Orochimaru's appearance. Soon, the transformation surgery that no one wanted to look at directly began. Orochimaru's subversive transformation method directly impacted the heart of every bystander present, not to mention others. Even Hyojin, who is proficient in biotechnology, felt a burst of numbness in his scalp. After a long time, this nightmarish transformation operation was finally over, and Danzo on the operating table was wrapped with layers of sutures and bandages, looking like a mummy. After leaving the root base, Hyojin quietly returned to the ninja school, and in his office, he evaluated Orochimaru's body transformation operation on Danzo. At this moment, he has to admit that he underestimated Orochimaru's ability to transform the human body. Danzo's body has two fatal problems before. The first is that the body is old, the cell vitality is insufficient, it is difficult to be the core to fuse with other bodies. The second is that the Sharingan and the Hashirama cells in his body are opposed to each other, not fusing, only maintaining a fragile balance. But Orochimaru's operation almost perfectly solved the two most fatal problems of Danzo's body. Now Danzo's body has been nourished by the Yang chakra in the Hashirama cells, the activity has been improved by leaps and bounds, as Danzo himself said, it is like returning to 30 years old. And the Sharingan and the Hashirama cells in his body have also completed the initial fusion, coupled with the assistance of the white Zetsu cells. This fusion will become more and more natural and closer. Including the 3 weeks of recovery time, after a month, the blood fusion ceremony should be able to officially start. After a pause, Hyojin said with anticipation, "I have put in so much effort for this, I hope that Danzo can last longer in the ceremony, so I can get more data." Chapter 594. Ningxi, you did very well, your exam score is excellent. Irika smiled as he gave Ningxi marks on the gradebook. On the podium, Ningxi dispelled the doppelganger he had just cast, saluted Irika calmly, and then slowly walked back to his seat. Ningxi had long mastered the level of doppelganger ninjutsu. Therefore, the exam that was quite stressful for other children had no practical meaning at all for him, and he did not feel the slightest bit proud of Irika's praise just now. As expected of the genius of the Hyuga clan. Looking at Ningxi's indifferent face, Irika sighed in his heart. In his eyes, a student like Ningxi was simply impeccable in all aspects. Turning the page on Ningxi, Irika looked at the students on the next page and shouted, "Next, Sasuke Uchiha." It's Sasuke-san's turn. Sasuke, you can do it! Sasuke, you're the best! In an instant there was a burst of cheers, and these cheers for Sasuke, without exception, were all girls in the class who admired Sasuke. Sasuke's face was cold, his hands in his trouser pockets, and he walked to the podium. Naruto in the audience looked envious. Damn, why is Sasuke so popular with girls? Teeth on the side curled his lips. Tsk, Sasuke is getting more and more arrogant. After motioning for the students to remain quiet, Irika smiled and asked Sasuke, "Sasuke, the content of this exam is one of the 3 body jutsu, which one are you going to choose?" At this time, Sasuke looked provocatively at Ningxi, who had just returned to his seat, and ignored Irika's question, directly made a seal with both hands, and activated the ninjutsu. Bang! After a burst of white smoke, another identical Sasuke appeared beside Sasuke. Sasuke chose the doppelganger technique. Wow, they look exactly the same. I can't tell which one is the real one. As expected of Lord Sasuke. When Sasuke finished his ninjutsu, the girls in the audience became restless again. At this moment, Irika, who was on the podium, had a solemn expression on his face. This was because through the sequence of Sasuke's hand seals, he realized that what Sasuke had just cast was not the doppelganger technique of the 3 bodies technique at all. Instead, it was the shadow doppelganger technique that allowed one to create a real entity and use it in battle. Humph. Under the stage, Ningxi snorted softly. In the classroom, apart from Irika, who was the instructor, only he could see that what Sasuke used was the shadow doppelganger technique. But he also knows the shadow doppelganger technique, so he was not as shocked as Irika. At this time, in the noisy classroom, the eyes of Sasuke on the stage and Ningxi under the stage intertwined, and sparks flew. Since the last time Hyojin easily cleaned up the group of Uchiha clansmen who broke into the Hyuga clan's territory to provoke, Sasuke and Ningxi have changed from a simple friendship to a competitor representing their respective families. On top of that, due to a freak combination of factors, the 2 of them ended up in the same batch. Since there was only one strongest in the same batch, the competition between the 2 of them, who bore the title of genius, became even more intense. Irika took a step forward and advised Sasuke with a serious face, "Sasuke, what you just used was the shadow doppelganger technique, right? This ninjutsu, for the current you, has a certain degree of risk, you have to." Without waiting for Irika to finish speaking, Sasuke interrupted him and asked coolly, "Hey, can you grade it now?" Irika, who was choked for a moment, shook his head secretly. He could see that Sasuke did not take his advice to heart at all. What Sasuke just used was the shadow doppelganger technique? That's a B-level ninjutsu that can only be practiced by at least a Chunin, right? Is this the talent of the Uchiha clan? The conversation between Irika and Sasuke made the already noisy classroom even noisier. This time, not only the girls who admired Sasuke, but also Naruto, Ding Ci, and other members of the Losers Alliance, who often challenged Sasuke, were also shocked by Sasuke's shadow doppelganger technique. Only Xiaoli was lying on the table with her hands on her head, muttering, "It's over, it's over." Next to her, Shikamaru said lazily, "Lee, what are you worried about? Sasuke's showing off his shadow doppelganger technique has nothing to do with us. We just need to use the normal 3 bodies technique, and we'll be able to pass." But I don't know how to do it," Xiaoli said with a sad face. "You don't know the doppelganger technique? That's fine too. You can choose the slightly simpler transfiguration technique," Shikamaru said indifferently. The children of the ninja clan had learned the basics of the 3 bodies technique from a very young age, so they didn't need the guidance of a teacher to pass it easily. Take Shikamaru for example. Although he looked uninterested in everything, in fact, he had already mastered the three bodies technique, so he wasn't afraid of the test at all. Xiaoli said helplessly, I don't know the transfiguration technique either. Shikamaru was slightly surprised. What about the transfiguration technique? Xiaoli still shook her head. Shikamaru smiled and patted Xiaoli's shoulder. Then don't worry. Why? Xiaoli was puzzled. Shikamaru smiled and said, You don't know any of the three bodies technique, so it's obvious that you can't pass. There's no use worrying. On the other side, Tian covered her mouth and snickered. Shikamaru, you really don't know how to comfort people at all. Xiaoli collapsed on the table, her eyes unfocused. On the podium, looking at Sasuke who was returning to his seat, Iruka sighed softly and immediately announced, Uchiha Sasuke, the result of the test is excellent. After a long time, Iruka, who had finished the test, came to the principal's office with the result book. Principal, the test is over. This is the result book, Iruka said as he handed the result book to Hyojin. After taking the result book and glancing at it, Hyojin's mouth twitched and revealed a smile. As expected, Sasuke and Ningxi were temporarily tied for first in the grade with excellent result. As for the other ninja, their results were also very good. At this time, Iruka said, Principal, do you really want to announce the results of this test? Wouldn't this be too unfair to the civilian ninja? The last place in this test was none other than the civilian ninja, Liluaka. Compared to Naruto, Xiaoli's ninjutsu talent was worse, so Iruka asked this question. Hyojin replied, Of course, rules are rules, and this is not a bad thing for Liluaka. He is a genius unlike the others. Mobile version of the fastest updated website. Chapter 595. Iruka still couldn't bear it. But showing the results on the display board outside the school, wouldn't it be? Hyojin glanced at Iruka and asked casually, Iruka, how long do you think it takes to learn one of the three body techniques? This. Iruka hesitated for a moment and asked tentatively, A month? Hyojin shook his head and said, If you can't learn one of the three body techniques in a week, it means you don't have talent in ninjutsu. This standard was actually very loose. According to Orochimaru's standard, if you can't learn one of the three body techniques in a day, you can be classified as an idiot. As for geniuses like Sasuke, Neji, and Kimimaro, they only needed a few hours to learn the three clones technique. Hyojin gave the students a full 2 weeks. Even the commoner students who hadn't been exposed to the three body techniques before should be able to master at least one of the three body technique. Iruka's face darkened. You mean Xiaoli doesn't have talent in ninjutsu? Are you going to expel him from the school? Hyojin shook his head and said, I just said that Lilac is a genius different from others. Now, any setbacks to him will be the driving force for him to move forward. Seeing that Hyojin didn't intend to expel Lilac, Iruka let out a long sigh of relief and said, But if we do this, won't it be too harsh on him? Hyojin looked out of the window and said, The current ninja world doesn't allow us to be affectionate. After Iruka left, Hyojin put the result book aside and took out a set of experimental data from the drawer and continued to study it seriously. During the 2 weeks of recovery from the Danzo surgery, Hyojin didn't stay idle. He has been focusing on the cell fusion experiment and the cultivation of the Earth release clone. Just like the previous instrument test, the cell tissue of Chakra's violent nature conflicts with Hyojin's own cell tissue, so the success rate of the fusion of the two is very low. It's almost close to the success rate of the fusion of the Uchiha clan's cell tissue and Hyojin's cell tissue. However, due to the update of equipment and technological progress, after a large number of experiments, Hyojin obtained more than 30 groups of successfully fused cell embryos and immediately put the 10 most active groups into the large nutrition tank to start the cultivation of the Earth release clone. At this moment, the experimental data in his hand is the data of the 10 Earth release clones that are being cultivated in the large nutrition tank transmitted by the Kazekage puppets on duty in the laboratory through the ninja crows. According to the data, the development of these 10 Earth release clones is very normal, neither deformed nor mutated. Therefore, it is difficult for Hyojin to choose which one to develop for the time being. He needs to further track the development of these 10 Earth release clones and wait for them to completely develop and stabilize before carrying out a detailed examination. Even with the updated equipment, the cultivation of the Earth release clones still takes 2 months. Therefore, before this batch of Earth release clones are completely formed, there should be a result on the Danzo side. Inside Naruto's office, the 3 generations put down their pipes and asked Kakashi with a solemn expression, "Have you found out everything?" Kakashi gently nodded. "Well, according to my investigation, Naruto-sama has recently transferred more than 1,000 people, and most of them have secretly left the village." The 3 generations frowned. "Do you know where they are going?" Kakashi shook his head. The 3 generations faintly felt uneasy. Suddenly transferring so many people from the village, what is he going to do? The matter of Danzo secretly transferring the ninjas from the village can be hidden from others, but it can't be hidden from the 3 generations. But this time Danzo did it very secretly, plus Danzo is the agent of Naruto, so he has the power to temporarily transfer the ninjas of Mai, so although the 3 generations are aware of it, they don't know what Danzo is going to do. Kakashi also said with some worry, "According to the feedback from the Umbu, Naruto-sama seems to continue to transfer people. Even some of the medical ninjas in my hospital were secretly transferred away by Naruto-sama on the grounds of a secret mission." The 3 generations were puzzled. Is he going to start a war? Thousands of ninjas are enough to launch a war against a small country, but because of the existence of the Akatsuki organization, Mai and the surrounding ninja villages are almost all in an alliance, so the 3 generations are very worried that Danzo is planning to attack a neighboring ally. Kakashi hurriedly asked, "What can I do now?" "Follow the ninjas that Danzo secretly transferred, be sure to find out where they are going, and what they are going to do." After a pause, the 3 generations did not forget to remind him, "You also have to pay attention to your own safety." Whoosh, Kakashi nodded, and then immediately disappeared from the office. After Kakashi left, the 3 generations paced back and forth in the office. The more he thought about it, the more worried he was, so he ordered the man standing outside the office, "Go and call the elders." In a volcanic cave in the north of the Land of Fire, Orochimaru was standing on a cliff, looking at the huge volcanic cave in front of him with a smile on his face. Even the air was filled with a burnt smell. There is no doubt that this volcanic cave in front of him is the place where Danzo is going to carry out the Kekkai Genkai fusion ritual, and at this moment, there are hundreds of root ninjas busy in the volcanic cave. Chapter 596. Whoosh, in the sound of the wind breaking, 2 black shadows fell into a small forest, bowed to a burly figure in the forest, and reported, "Laying-sama, we found a suspicious place." The person standing in the forest was none other than the 4 generations Laying of Cloud Village, and the 2 who were reporting to him were the Umbu of Cloud Village. Listening to the report of the Umbu, the 4 generations Laying's face was extremely gloomy. His eyes contained a strong killing intent, and the chakra fluctuating on his body was exuding a violent aura. His whole person was like an angry ancient beast growling, "Tell me, where is it?" In the roar of 4 generations Laying, the 2 Umbu subordinates of Cloud Village subconsciously shrank their necks, looked at each other, and then one of them bit the bullet and reported to 4 generations Laying. According to this, a volcanic cave about 20 kilometers away is very suspicious, but there is a large number of my ninjas stationed nearby. We can't get close to investigate. At this time, A Cloud Elite Jonin next to 4 generations laying immediately unfolded the map of the country of fire on the ground, found the volcanic cave pointed out by the Umbu, and wondered, "Is the ritual site here? Traitor!" The angry 4 generations laying punched the big tree next to him. Boom! With a loud noise, the thick tree that could only be held by 2 or 3 people spread out their arms was directly blown away by 4 generations laying's punch. He had reason to be angry, because not long ago, a Jonin with the mist release Kekii limit in the Cloud Village disappeared for no reason, and according to the subsequent investigation, the Umbu found that the missing Jonin was most likely attacked by my ninjas. As an ally against the Akatsuki, 4 generations laying can't tolerate Mai's despicable behavior of plotting against an ally, not to mention that even in the Cloud Village, there are only a handful of ninjas with the mist release Kekii limit. And because of Hirako, it is not difficult for 4 generations laying to guess the purpose of Mai's abduction. Because of this, 4 generations laying is particularly angry at Mai's betrayal, because in his opinion, the Chimera technique is a top-secret forbidden technique of the Akatsuki, and if Mai didn't collude with the Akatsuki, then it would be impossible for him to obtain the Chimera technique. And my abducting the mist release Kekii limit is obviously to replicate Hirako's Kekii limit fusion ceremony, and create a perfect ninja with multiple Kekii limit fusion ceremony. In other words, Mai must have obtained the Chimera technique at this moment. For the sake of a witchcraft, Mai actually colluded with the Akatsuki and betrayed our 5 great shinobi villages. This traitor must be punished. 4 generations laying said angrily, seemingly having made up his mind. The elite Jonin on the side hurriedly said, "Laying, Sama, please don't be impulsive, we are currently understaffed, and rashly clashing with Mai will result in unpredictable consequences. Why don't we inform the other great shinobi villages first, and then put pressure on Mai to force Mai to release the ninja?" Idiot, by the time we contact the other shinobi villages, Mai would have already completed the ceremony and destroyed the evidence. Waving his hand, 4 generations laying said angrily, "Don't say anything more, gather the people around and prepare to raid the lava cave with me." Yes. Seeing that 4 generations laying has made up his mind, the ninjas hiding in the woods could only respond in unison inside the lava cave. Hyojin, who was riding the fire release clone, was strolling in the cave filled with the smell of sulfur, observing the root ninjas around him who were busy with the ceremony. The volcanic cave selected by Shimura Danzo has a very large area. Even if the large and small lava pools in the cave are removed, the area is still as big as a football field. In the center of the lava cave, the root ninjas are building an altar about 3 meters high and 20 meters in diameter. The altar is surrounded by large and small lava pools, and the boiling magma in the pool caused the temperature around the altar to rise sharply. This can be seen from the sweat on the root ninjas busy working on the altar. Soon, Hyojin's eyes fell on the 5 torture racks standing on the altar. If there is no accident, the 5 torture racks on the altar will bind the 5 Kekii Genkai, captured by Danzo, and devour them one by one during the Kekii Genkai fusion ceremony. At this time, the disguised Orochimaru walked towards Hyojin. Hyojin also glanced at Orochimaru, who was walking towards him. Because there are too many Mai ninjas in the vicinity of the lava cave, in order to avoid suspicion, Orochimaru, as a Mai traitorous ninja, is currently dressed like a root ninja, but the smile on his face makes him out of place with the stiff and gloomy expressions of the root members around him. After getting closer, Orochimaru asked casually as if he was chatting with Kuroto, "How is this cave?" Hyojin's face was indifferent. "Not bad, it meets the standard." Orochimaru grinned and said, "You don't seem to be in a good mood?" Hyojin was silent and didn't answer Orochimaru's question. For a ceremony that is destined to fail, Hyojin naturally won't have too much excitement. On the contrary, he is a little uneasy now. Danzo's upcoming Kekii fusion ritual, to some extent, is a preview of Hyojin's future Kekiai trap plan. Although the ritual in front of him is destined to fail, but exactly which step it will fail, which part of the failure, is a crucial question for Hyojin. And the reason why he maintained a calm state of mind is to not let the anxiety of gains and losses interfere with his observation and analysis of the entire ritual. Orochimaru smiled again. It seems that you are very pessimistic about this ceremony. Hyojin narrowed his eyes and looked at Orochimaru. He doesn't know why, but he always has a feeling that Orochimaru seems to be planning something. After a moment of silence, Hyojin simply warned, Orochimaru, don't have any ideas about this ceremony. Orochimaru shrugged. Everything I do is under the supervision of Amatsukami and Danzo's root ninja. What do you have to worry about? Hyojin retracted his gaze. Orochimaru is right, whether it is the improvement of the Chimera technique or the planning of the Kekiai fusion ritual. He and the root ninja participated in the whole process. Even if Orochimaru wants to play tricks, there is no chance at all. After all, Danzo only trusts himself. Whether it is Amatsukami or Orochimaru, Danzo has never let down his guard. Dong dong at this moment, with the sound of a cane hitting the ground from afar, the protagonist of the ceremony appeared. Chapter 597. Following the sound of the cane hitting the ground, Kuroto turned his head and saw that Shimura Danzo was still in his old attire, with bandages all over his body and a cane in his hand. Humph! Hyojin couldn't help but spit on the ground. After the transformation surgery performed by Orochimaru, Danzo's physique has now surpassed 99% of the ninjas in the shinobi world. Not only is there no sign of injury on his body, but his cells are also full of vitality. It can be said that the current Danzo's physique is stronger than when he was young, and his strength has surpassed the current 3 generations in one fell swoop. He is now qualified to become Naruto. Seeing Danzo appear, Orochimaru said to Hyojin with a smile, "He is really careful." Even though there are clearly root ninjas all around him, Danzo still didn't forget to disguise himself. From this point alone, it can be seen that Danzo doesn't trust anyone except himself. Walking in front of Hyojin and Orochimaru, Danzo asked, "How is the arrangement of the ceremony?" "The part inside the cave is almost complete." After a pause, Orochimaru smiled and said, "As for the chakra array outside the cave, I will have to ask you, Naruto-sama. The ceremony planned by Hyojin and Orochimaru is divided into 2 parts, inside and outside the cave. The inside part of the cave is mainly the altar and some related sealing techniques, while the outside part is the huge chakra array. The bloodline fusion ritual requires a huge amount of chakra to support it. In order to solve this problem, Hirako came up with the ingenious method of moving the ritual to the top of a mountain and borrowing the power of the stars. As for Danzo, because of the imbalance of the chakra attribute in his body, he needs to use the special environment of the volcano cave to suppress the excessive water attribute chakra in his body. Therefore, he can't replicate Hirako's method of using the astral force. He can only use the chakra transmission array to mobilize a large number of my ninjas to act as a temporary chakra battery for his ritual. Danzo said indifferently, "Don't worry, this old man has transferred 1,500 ninjas from the village. They are now gathered outside the cave." 1,500 people? TSK, how generous! Orochimaru was speechless. One must know that even for a great ninja village like Mai, secretly mobilizing 1,500 ninjas is not a small matter. Moreover, these ninjas are used as the chakra battery, so the proportion of chakras genin shouldn't be high. In other words, among these 1,500 Mai ninjas, there should be a large proportion of Chunin Jonin, which is not something an ordinary army of 1,500 can compare with. Hyojin couldn't help but be surprised. This kind of formation can only be done by the temporary Naruto Danzo. no one else would be able to do it. This also makes Hyojin secretly glad that he chose Danzo as the guinea pig for this experiment. If the guinea pig was replaced by someone else, who knows how much effort he would have to put into this experiment? Regarding Orochimaru's surprise, Danzo responded, "This matter is related to this old man's life and death, as well as the future of the shinobi world. It is their honor to be able to participate." At this time Hyojin asked, "Although the chakra transportation array is not a difficult technology, but if it is not tested repeatedly in advance, it is difficult to guarantee the stability. You should have considered this problem, right?" Danzo said lightly, "The chakra transportation array outside the cave has been tested 47 times, and everything is in line with the standards you have set, so there should be no problems." Hyojin gently nodded. As long as the chakra transportation array is stable, then according to the plan, a total of 1,500 my ninjas should be enough to maintain the Kekii Genin ritual. Choking with sobs, Chi-Chi novel WWW. After all, Danzo is no longer the same as he was in the past. After fusing the Yang chakra from the Hashirama cells and the Yin chakra from the Sharingan, the amount of chakra in his body is probably only inferior to the few famous experts in the shinobi world and the Jinchuriki who have tailed beasts in their bodies. Hyojin calmed himself down and asked, "When do we start?" Danzo glanced at Orochimaru. Orochimaru, who was responsible for the internal construction of the lava cave, grinned. "Anytime." Dong Danzo slammed his staff into the ground and announced, "Then let's begin." Following Danzo's order, the 5 captured Kekii Genin ninjas were brought to the altar one after another and locked on the 5 torture racks on the altar. This is the first time that Danzo showed Hyojin and Orochimaru the captured Kekii Genin ninjas, so both Hyojin and Orochimaru looked over at the same time. The 5 Kekii Genin ninjas on the torture racks are in a comatose state at the moment. It seems that they have been injected with some kind of hypnotic drug. 3 of them are dressed like civilians, while the other 2 are dressed like cloud ninjas and mist ninjas. The dark-skinned middle-aged cloud ninja should be the mist release Kekii Genin, the mist ninja should be the boiling release Kekii Genin, and the remaining 3 should be the dark release Kekii Genin, crystal release Kekii Genin, and rapid release Kekii Genin. With just a glance, Hyojin roughly distinguished their respective Kekii Genin from their physical characteristics. At this time, Danzo walked to the altar step by step with his staff. He first glanced indifferently at the 5 Kekii Genin ninjas tied to the torture racks, then turned around and looked at Hyojin and Orochimaru under the altar, revealing a cold smile. In fact, Danzo has secretly arranged for people to bury detonation talismans at various supporting points in the cave. Once the ritual is successfully completed, he will detonate these detonation talismans, erasing all the evidence in the cave, and at the same time, purging both Suijin and Orochimaru at the same time. As for Amatsukumi's subsequent condemnation, he can just say that it was an accident, and after completing the Kekii Genin fusion ceremony, he doesn't need to fear Amatsukumi anymore. Under the altar, both Hyojin and Orochimaru noticed the cold expression on Danzo's face, but they chose to remain calm. In Hyojin's view, the one on the altar is just a poor white mouse, a mouse that will inevitably die in the experiment, so no matter how the mouse shows its fangs and claws at him, he won't care too much. Orochimaru also had a smile on his face, as if he didn't notice the killing intent that Danzo inadvertently revealed. Chapter 598. Gently pushing aside the branches in front of him, Kakashi saw a neat and huge formation of ninjas. No, it should be said that it was a huge ninja army. Hiss! This scene caused Kakashi to suck in a breath of cold air. The ninja army in front of him had more than a dozen lines, roughly counting, there were at least more than 1,000 people. In other words, The Mai ninjas that were secretly transferred out of the village by the acting Naruto Danzo were probably all gathered here. But Kakashi really couldn't think of any reason for more than 1,000 Mai ninjas to gather in this wilderness. Suppressing the surging shock in his heart, he took out a monocular from the ninja bag. After the Manjikyu Sharingan in his left eye was taken away, although it made him feel a lot more relaxed, and he didn't have to worry about the chakra all the time, but also because of the loss of the Manjikyu Sharingan, his insight plummeted, so sometimes he had to use observation equipment that he didn't use before. No, the ground under their feet seems to be engraved with some kind of tactic, and there seems to be a pipeline connecting them. This is not a normal gathering. Soon, through the observation of the monocular, Kakashi found that the more than 1,000 Mai ninjas in the distance in a neat formation were not just gathering in a simple formation, but distributed on a huge tactical formation. What is Danzo trying to do? For a moment, Kakashi's heart was in a storm. Although he didn't know what Danzo was trying to do, Kakashi's intuition told him that it must be something bad. So he no longer hesitated and immediately recorded everything he saw in detail in the communication scroll, and then summoned the communication eagle in the village, and sent the confidential information in front of him back to the village. After doing all this, his eyes followed the chakra pipeline that was connected to thousands of ninjas, all the way to the entrance of the volcano cave, and thought to himself, the answer should be in the cave. However, the security at the entrance of the cave was very tight. On the surface, there were 4 squads of guards and more than 10 ninjas. There were probably more hidden sentries in the dark. So even if he mastered the Flying Thunder God technique, Kakashi couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Damn it, how should I sneak in? Inside the lava cave. The 3 of them smiled at each other and quickly moved their gazes away in tacit understanding. Under the oppressive atmosphere, each of them made their final preparations. Danzo slowly walked to the center of the altar, tossing his staff to the attendant beside him. Then, he sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. Below the altar, Hyojin took out a special scroll from the ninja bag around his waist, unlocked the seal on it, and took out 2 large observation instruments from it. According to common sense, with the inside of the pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets, he can easily observe all the details of the Kekkai Genkai fusion ritual and collect all the data he wants to collect without the help of any kind of observation instrument. But to be on the safe side, he still brought these 2 monitoring instruments with him. After all, this Kekkai Genkai fusion ritual can't be repeated. Regardless of success or failure, it can only be done once, so this is the only opportunity for him to collect precious data. He can't tolerate any accidents. Looking at Hyojin meticulously debugging the observation instruments, Orochimaru's eyes became deep and asked casually, "In your Amatsukami, are you the only one watching the ritual today? I thought that at least Kamikaze would come." Hyojin said, "It's just collecting data. I alone am enough. It seems that Kamikaze's physical condition is worse than I expected." With a smile, Orochimaru glanced at the root ninjas who were quietly gathering around and lowered his voice. Danzo also seems to have other intentions. After completing the debugging of the instrument, Hyojin casually glanced around and found that there were indeed a lot of root ninjas secretly approaching him, and judging from the chakra on their bodies, they seemed to be Jonin-level experts. After withdrawing his gaze, Hyojin turned a deaf ear to Orochimaru's warning and the actions of the root ninjas. He wasn't sure if Danzo wanted to make a move on him and Orochimaru after the ritual, or if it was just purely to guard against him and Orochimaru, but no matter what it was, it didn't matter now. Not long after, the busy root ninjas on the altar retreated one by one, and at this time, the whole altar was only left with Danzo sitting cross-legged in the middle, and the 5 Kekkai Genkai tied to the torture rack. Slowly opening his eyes, Danzo stood up and said in a dignified tone, "Let's begin." With a smile on his face, Orochimaru, who was standing under the stage, walked to the seal that was used to activate the ceremony, made a series of complex hand seals with his hands, and then pressed on the seal and shouted, "Open!" Whoosh! As Orochimaru activated the ritual, in an instant, the light on the altar brightened, and a vortex appeared. The whirlpool that was suddenly generated wrapped the boiling heat waves in the lava pool around the altar, thickening the air on the altar, as if the time in this area had slowed down. "Where am I? Who are you people, and why did you bring me here?" Sob. Sob. "Please don't kill me." At this time, the Kekii Genkai on the torture rack all woke up, except for the Cloud Ninja with the Mist Release, and the Mist Ninja with the Boiling Release. The other 3 Kekii Genkai ninjas in civilian clothes all cried out. Obviously, these 3 Kekii Genkai ninjas in civilian clothes were not so much ninjas, but more like ordinary people with Kekii Genkai. Because from their demeanor, it seems that they have not received formal ninja training at all, but just inherited the ability inherited from their bloodline. They may have the talent to become excellent ninjas, but because of various reasons, they missed the opportunity to receive ninja training, and because of the luck of awakening Kekii Genkai made them the target of Danzo. Unlike the 3 who were crying, the Cloud Ninja with the Mist Release, after carefully observing the situation in the cave, shouted at Shimura Danzo, "Shimura Danzo, do you know the consequences of doing this? Because of the previous 3rd Shinobi War, Cloud and Mai infiltrated each other, and both sides have a good understanding of each other, so this Cloud Ninja with the Mist Release recognized Danzo at a glance. On the other side, the Mist Ninja with the Boiling Release also echoed, 'You dare to attack your ally, Mizukage-sama will not let you go.' Facing the shouts of the Cloud and Mist Ninjas, Danzo lightly snorted, 'Humph, you are just a waste of blood, you should feel honored to be able to help this old man.'" Chapter 599. Listening to Danzo's cold words and looking at the mysterious altar in front of him, the Mist Ninja realized something and asked in horror, You want to imitate Hirako?" The Mist Ninja couldn't help but tremble. "You damned demon!" With the rise of the Akatsuki, the name Hirako has become a nightmare for many Kekii Genkai ninjas, because he and the forbidden technique Chimera technique that he developed have made all Kekii Genkai ninjas prey. Standing in the center of the altar, Danzo coldly glanced at the 5 Kekii Genkai ninjas on the rack and clasped his hands together. Clap, amidst the crisp sound of a palm strike, the bandages wrapped around his body ruptured one by one. Countless transparent gels spilled out from the gaps of his bandages. These gels were the new ghost sprout that Hyojin and Orochimaru developed. The reason why they chose to hold the Kekii Genkai fusion ceremony in the volcano cave, in addition to other factors, was because of the new ghost sprout. Because the new ghost sprout is affected by temperature, and in a high-temperature environment, its activity will surpass the old ghost sprout and produce a stronger fusion effect than the old ghost sprout. Sama will avenge me. What the hell is this? Don't come near me. I beg you, please spare me. Whoa! The 5 Kekii Genkai who were tied to the rack and unable to move saw the ghost sprout rushing towards them. They either cursed loudly, begged for mercy in panic, or burst into tears. Seeing their reactions, Danzo showed a look of disdain. As a civilian ninja without Kekii Genkai, Danzo, like Orochimaru, has been seeking the power of Kekii Genkai. He has conducted all kinds of cruel human experiments in private, all in order to satisfy his desire for this power. Now, everything would belong to him, and Danzo couldn't help but feel a sense of superiority in his heart, as if he had become a god at this moment. Looking at Danzo's gradually blurring eyes, Orochimaru revealed a cold smile. At the same time, his snake-like vertical pupils flashed with greed. For a short moment, he looked at Danzo as if he was appreciating a work of art that was about to belong to him. At the same time, Suijin activated the 2 observation instruments beside him, and in the eye sockets under the flame-patterned mask, the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan was revealed. Amidst a series of screams and roars, the ghost sprouts stretched out from Danzo's body and wrapped around the 5 Kekii Genkai ninjas on the torture rack and pulled them off the rack one by one. Soon, the cries of the 5 Kekii Genkai ninjas became quieter and quieter. As they were engulfed by the transparent ghost sprouts, the altar gradually returned to silence. Only the sound of the ghost sprouts and the roaring of the cyclone could be heard. Under the flame mask, Hyojin's originally calm face showed a trace of surprise. He predicted that in a high-temperature environment, the devouring ability of the new ghost sprouts would be better than the old ghost sprouts, but he didn't expect it to be so much stronger. Compared to the devouring process of Hiriko, Danzo's devouring this time was simply too smooth. Hyojin even felt that Danzo didn't use his full strength to activate the ghost sprouts. Thinking of this, Hyojin turned his head and looked at Orochimaru, who discovered the new ghost sprouts, and secretly sighed, "What an amazing discovery!" Suddenly, Hyojin's brows furrowed. He noticed that there was something wrong with Orochimaru's eyes when he looked at the altar. It was a mixture of expectation, covetousness, and even greed. Ha! At this time, Danzo on the altar shouted and urged the ghost sprouts that had devoured the 5 Kekii Genkai ninjas to return to his body. The Kekii Genkai fusion ceremony has reached the most critical stage. Hyojin didn't dare to be distracted, so he retracted his gaze from Orochimaru, suppressed the vague uneasiness in his heart, and focused all his attention on the Danzo on the altar. The devouring of the ghost sprouts was only the first step. The real difficulty was the fusion, which was to fuse 5 times his own flesh and blood at once. As the ghost sprouts that had devoured the 5 Kekii Genkai returned to Danzo's body, Danzo's face became gloomy, as if countless emotions were reflected on his face at the same time. Ah! At this time, Danzo roared, and his chakra burst out without reservation. Boom! In an instant, a huge amount of chakra lingered on Danzo's body, and as this chakra burst out, the fusion quickly intensified. What a strong chakra! Hyojin frowned and exclaimed. Even he couldn't help but be shocked by the chakra amount that erupted from Danzo at this moment. This chakra amount had far exceeded the scope of a normal ninja, and had faintly reached the level of Jinchuriki. If the dragon vein chakra was not counted, even Hyojin's own body, in terms of the chakra amount, was probably not as good as Danzo's. Orochimaru laughed and said, not bad at all." Hyojin suddenly felt that Orochimaru's human transformation operation on Danzo was not as simple as he thought, but he really didn't have the energy to think about it now. On the altar, Danzo roared, "Not enough, not enough! Orochimaru, open the chakra transmission array." Even with such a huge amount of chakra, it was still not enough for the fusion, and the speed of the fusion was still not as fast as Danzo expected, so he didn't hesitate to order Orochimaru to open the chakra transmission array outside the cave. Orochimaru didn't say any nonsense, decisively made a hand seal, and then pressed on the seal to control the ritual. In an instant, more than 1,500 my ninjas gathered outside the volcano cave felt their chakra being extracted by the seal under their feet. Don't panic, this is just a normal chakra transmission test. Chapter 600. This? The expression on Hyojin's face instantly froze. Kuroto clearly remembers that Shimura Danzo only had a San Magatama Sharingan transplanted in his right eye, and the left eye was Shimura Danzo's own eye. Even the previous transformation surgery did not involve this aspect of the eye. But at this moment, the 2 eyes in Danzo's eye sockets not only turned into Scarlet Sharingan, but the 2 Magatama on the 2 Sharingan were also spinning faster and faster, faintly connecting into a circle. Seeing this scene, Even those who are not familiar with the Sharingan can see the abnormality of the pair of Sharingan in Danzo's eye sockets at a glance, not to mention a researcher like Suijin who has a deep understanding of the Sharingan, so he couldn't help but ask in surprise, is he going to awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan? Thinking quickly, Hyojin immediately analyzed the cause of this scene. Although Danzo's left eye is his own eye and not a Sharingan, but in fact, the real thing that makes the Sharingan become a Sharingan is not the flesh and blood, but the in-release chakra that has the characteristics of the Uchiha clan. In the original world, during the last battle against Kaguya, Obsidian, who was killed by the mutual kill Greybone, used the remaining pupil power in his soul to activate the Kamui, passing through the boundary between Yin and Yang, returning to the shinobi world, and entrusted the rest of the pupil power to Kakashi, turning Kakashi's eyes into Manjikyu Sharingan, allowing him to experience the Kamui Susanoo for a short time. From this, it can be seen that the essence of the Sharingan is the characteristic of chakra, or the pupil power. Danzo can instantly turn his ordinary left eye into 3 Magatama Sharingan, which means that in the state of fusion, his body already has a high-intensity in-release chakra that is comparable to the 3 Magatama Uchiha clan. Moreover, as the fusion progresses, the strength of the in-release chakra in his body is gradually increasing, which explains why the Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets shows signs of awakening. After sorting through these, Hyojin instantly reacted. Kuroto found that he doesn't need the assistance of the 2 instruments around him at all, because as long as he looks at the Danzo's eyes, he can accurately judge the state of the Danzo's body through the state of the Danzo Sharingan, and even judge the progress of the Danzo fusion. This was undoubtedly the most direct observation and the most accurate. Orochimaru naturally noticed the abnormality of the Sharingan in Danzo's eye sockets, and his face suddenly showed an extremely crazy expression. It was a mixture of yearning, expectation, covetousness, and even admiration and shock. The greed in his snake-like vertical pupils was completely overflowing, without any concealment. Orochimaru's ugly behavior was seen by Hyojin from the corner of his eye. The obvious abnormality of the Danzo on the altar not only caused Hyojin and Orochimaru to be surprised, but also caused the root ninjas who were waiting around the altar to panic. At this time, the chief research officer saw that the Danzo has completely lost control of the ghost sprouts. He didn't care much and quickly activated a large instrument that was prepared by the altar. Puff, with the activation of the instrument, an icy mist instantly filled the entire altar, and under the rapid cooling of the ice mist, the ghost sprouts on the Danzo's body immediately lost their vitality, like a withered plant, and withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although the ghost sprouts were controlled, the abnormality of the Danzo's spirit body was not solved. He directly knelt on the altar, the expression on his face constantly changing. His whole body was on the verge of collapse. Regarding this, Hyojin wasn't too surprised. According to his latest calculations, the probability of the Danzo surviving the Kekii fusion ritual was only a pitiful 2%, and the probability of the Danzo achieving Kekii net was infinitely close to 0. The reason for this was because the Danzo team still didn't realize the importance of the Kekii fusion. Mobile version of the fastest updated website. Chapter 601. Damn it, kneeling on the altar, Danzo's expression became more and more distorted, as if he was drowning, desperately trying to find a life-saving straw that doesn't exist at all. The low roar that came out of his throat was like the roar of an evil spirit from the netherworld, which made people's hair stand on end. There is no doubt that the progress of Danzo's body fusion has also stagnated, which can be seen from the Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets that didn't change at all. Because the newly born Manjikyu Sharingan is the most intuitive portrayal of the fusion of chakra in Danzo's body. Whether there is a fusion of different chakra in Danzo's body, the efficiency of fusion, the speed of fusion, etc., will directly reflect on his Manjikyu Sharingan. It can be said that the newly born Manjikyu Sharingan is the most accurate indicator of the fusion progress of Danzo's body. Is this the end? Hyojin secretly sighed under the stage. At this point in the ceremony, he did not know whether he should feel sorry or relieved. After all, the 2% probability of Danzo surviving the ritual is extremely low, but it is still possible. If Danzo is really lucky and survives the Chakra Genkai fusion ritual, even if he becomes a defective product like Hirako, his strength will still skyrocket, not to mention that he now has a pair of Manjikyu Sharingan with unknown abilities. So, if Danzo doesn't die, Hyojin will have a headache next. Phew, the improvement of the Chimera technique is a success, and there seems to be no problem with the arrangement of the ritual. This rehearsal is more successful than expected. But the problem of the new Chimera sprout suddenly going berserk needs further investigation. After exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Hyojin, who has been tense all this time, began his own summary. He was generally satisfied with the rehearsal this time, because in the early and middle stages of the ritual, which was the process of devouring and fusion, everything went according to his plan, and the entire process was very smooth. This undoubtedly meant that his improvements to the Gue Yero technique, as well as the arrangement of the ritual, were all correct. He could directly copy it and use it on himself. Unlike Hyojin, who was quietly waiting for the Danzo to die and waiting for the opportunity to retrieve his Manjikyu Sharingan, the root ninjas on the side saw that the Danzo on the altar was on the verge of collapse, and were extremely anxious. The chief research officer of Roots ran to Orochimaru's side and shouted, "Orochimaru, quickly think of something." Orochimaru stared at the altar and answered, "Don't worry, wait a little longer." When Hyojin heard this, he immediately frowned. With the current situation of the Danzo, anyone with a discerning eye would know that it was hopeless. He was a little curious as to why Orochimaru was still so calm, as if he was not surprised at all. With the intervention of nature energy, all the souls mixed in the Danzo's body were eroded by nature energy, and the interference caused by the soul conflict gradually decreased, and the stagnant fusion ceremony progressed again. At this time, the pair of Manjikyu Sharingan in Danzo's eye sockets has undergone a significant change. The edges and corners of the gear pattern have become sharper and sharper, like saw-teeth entrenched in the scarlet pupil. This eternal Manjikyu Sharingan? Looking at this scene, Hyojin, who has been calm, couldn't help but show a look of surprise. After solving the problem of soul fusion, this bloodline fusion ceremony seemed to be developing in an uncontrollable direction. And Orochimaru, who was also staring at the Danzo's eye sockets, at this moment, with a fanatical face, he murmured, "So Manjikyu Sharingan is not the end of the Sharingan." Mobile version of the fastest updated website. For this old man, any sacrifice of the village is worth it. Without waiting for the chief research officer to finish his words, Danzo, who was on the altar, interrupted him with some inarticulate words. The chief researcher had no choice but to increase the power of the chakra transmission array again. He knows that if he does this, the casualties outside will not be as simple as one or two people. Outside the cave, in an instant, the chakra transmission array was filled with screams. The sudden increase of chakra transmission array instantly drained some of the weaker My Ninja's chakra. Some of the genin ninjas were directly sucked dry and died on the spot. Why is it still absorbing chakra? Hey, didn't you say it was just a test? What the hell are you guys doing? Seeing the tragic death of their companions, the My Ninjas in the array questioned the root ninjas who were patrolling around. At this time, several of the root leaders in charge of monitoring the chakra transmission array looked at each other, then one of them quickly made a hand seal and activated a secret seal on the chakra transmission array. As the seal was activated, in an instant, thousands of my ninjas in the array suddenly found their bodies completely locked in place, unable to move at all, let alone escape from the chakra transmission array. Looking at the terrified my ninjas in the array, the root leader who activated the seal said coldly, "Sorry, for the sake of Naruto-sama, I can only sacrifice you guys." Chapter 603. Under the confinement of the seal, the 1,500 my ninjas who were bound in the chakra transmission array became human chakra batteries. Some of the jonins and chunin with better physique could still bear it for the time being, but the genin all showed serious side effects without exception. The essence of chakra was actually the fusion of the ninjas' mental strength and physical strength. Because in the case of sacrificing their own health and life, ninjas could extract more chakra, so to a certain extent, chakra could barely be equivalent to the ninja's life force. Therefore, excessive extraction of the ninja's chakra was equivalent to extracting their life force. Bang bang in a series of muffled sounds, due to physical exhaustion, the my ninjas in the chakra transmission array fainted on the ground one after another. Kakashi, who was hiding in the distance and observing the chakra transmission array, naturally noticed this change and suddenly said in shock, "What's going on? Why did so many ninjas suddenly fall down? What happened in the lava cave?" "Inside the lava cave. Not enough, not enough. Give me chakra, more chakra." Danzo, who was still in the middle of the fusion ceremony, knelt in the middle of the altar. His expression was extremely painful. His face was distorted, his nose and saliva were flowing, as if he had lost control of his face, and could only roar incoherently, like a desperate beast. Below the altar, the chief researcher of the root was horrified, and while wiping the fine sweat from his forehead, he stammered, "Fire! Naruto-sama, this is our limit." At this time, the chakra emitted from Danzo's body was so thick that it was visible to the naked eye. Such a huge chakra amount was the first time he had seen such a huge amount in his life. After witnessing the chaos of the Nine Tails, he even felt that the chakra amount on Danzo's body had exceeded that of the 9 tails that ravaged the village. But even so, Danzo was still not satisfied, and wanted more chakra, which really shocked and scared him. Danzo roared in pain, hurry up and increase the power." "Increase?" The chief researcher of the root's face stiffened. "If he continues to increase the power, then the more than 1,000 Konoha ninjas outside won't be a problem of casualties, but a problem of whether or not some of them will survive. A total of 1,500 ninjas from the same village, even if he killed them, he wouldn't dare to make such a decision easily. One must know that the more than 1,000 ninjas outside have relatives and friends in the village. If he killed them, then he would become the enemy of the whole village. Even if Danzo survived the ceremony, the chief researcher thought that he would be executed by Danzo as a scapegoat. After all, someone has to bear the responsibility for such a crime. On the other side, Orochimaru was completely immersed in the blood fusion ceremony. No wonder only by resurrecting the 10 tails, activating the infinite Tsukuyomi, and gathering the chakra of all the ninjas in the shinobi world together can Kagaya, who has achieved the Kekkai net, escape. It turns out that when it comes to achieving the Kekkai net, the chakra amount is a difficult problem that cannot be avoided. Looking at Danzo, who is roaring in pain on the altar for chakra, Hyojin felt a little empathetic for a moment. This rehearsal to break through the Kekkai net first gave him hope, but also showed the cruelest side of reality in front of him. At this moment, Danzo on the altar saw that the chief research officer of the Root Academy did not move for a long time, so he turned his head and stared at him with difficulty. My body," with just a glance from Danzo, the chief research officer of the Root Academy lost control of his body, and involuntarily turned the power of the chakra transmission array to the maximum. In an instant, with more chakra support, the new pair of Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in Danzo's eye sockets changed again, and the gears in the scarlet pupil began to distort. Is there a stronger form of Sharingan? Seeing this, Orochimaru blurted out in shock. At this time, Hyojin suddenly covered his eyes, and for some reason, the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets also became restless.